Chapter 1426. Let's see how you block it. Meng Ta saw that Yi Chun didn't miss a single strike, and his heart turned vicious. His spinning speed became even faster, and the speed of his blade had at least doubled. Previously, he was in his normal state, and now he was in his explosive state. Although this state couldn't last long, it could still last for a period of time. Clang, 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 clang. Dense sparks interweaved together, and they were as viscous as magma. If it was someone else, they might have to use force to defeat Meng Ta, but Yi Chun didn't plan to do so. This time, he had encountered Meng Ta, and if he met someone thousands of times stronger than Meng Ta, then he wouldn't be able to fight. After all, he wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand every time. Lightly touching the ground, Yi Chun flew backward, and Meng Ta chased after him, not giving Yi Chun any chance to increase the distance. But for Yi Chun, it was enough to temporarily increase the distance. Heaven's sword in his hand shook, and 9 formless whirlpools appeared around Meng Ta. Space-time sword art's third style, black hole form. In the primal chaos battlefield, black hole form couldn't create a real black hole, but could create a whirlpool. The power of the whirlpool wasn't great, but could affect the opponent's center of gravity. As expected, not good. Meng Ta accidentally bumped into a whirlpool, and his center of gravity immediately changed, causing him to stagger. Swish! Yi Chun was like a venomous snake waiting for a chance to hunt. Heaven's sword turned into a beam of light, and he attacked Meng Ta. Open. Meng Ta had 3 heads and 6 arms, and even if his center of gravity was unstable, he could still use his other arms to block. This was the terrifying part of the ancient multiverse. Although the center of gravity was a weakness, it was only relatively speaking, and it didn't mean that he wouldn't be able to resist at all. If that was the case, the ancient multiverse wouldn't be one of the powerful universes. Yi Chun didn't think that he could finish off his opponent with one sword, and the first sword was just the beginning. Ding, 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 ding. Previously, Meng Ta was the main attacker, and now it was Yi Chun's turn. White sword light spurted out, and Meng Ta was covered in it. 1 step, 2 steps. Yi Chun did not give Meng Ta a chance to stabilize his center of gravity. He let Meng Ta sway around and did not manage to stand straight at all. Meanwhile, Yi Chun's sword was slowly tearing apart Meng Ta's protective net, Meng Ta's 6 arms that held the sword. This is the moment. With Yi Chun's sword speed, none of Meng Tuo's 6 arms would be able to save him. Hiss! Fresh blood sprayed as Yi Chun's sword pierced through Meng Tuo's chest, and then his figure floated backwards, causing others to feel as if he'd done it with ease. It had to be said that Meng Tuo was harder to deal with in the Sky Tyrant universe life form. But overall, Yi Chun felt that the Sky Tyrant universe life form might be more powerful. Immunity to most physical attacks was too overpowered. In the future, if he encountered other life forms of the ancient multiverse or Sky Tyrant universe, Yi Chun did not dare to think that he would be able to win. Let's go. It was obvious that no one had given up and planned to attack together. This was mainly because Yi Chun did not use his full strength. It seemed that he was only slightly stronger than Meng Ta and Zachary. Sorry for offending you. Meng Tuo's expression was a little unnatural. Yi Chun had the chance to kill him just now, but there was no other way. The Primal Chaos Talisman was too important, and no one was willing to give it up. At most, he would just stop the others from killing Yi Chun. Kill! The spear-wielding Jin universe life form took the lead. Yi Chun sneered. Even if he didn't use the law of water and firmament, he was not someone that a mob could contend against. His rank 9 sword intent and golden soul gave him the capital to look down on everyone. Without any technique, Yi Chun just used the simplest 4-elephant tyrant sword. 4-elephant tyrant sword was the first style of the 4-elephant sword art. It was derived from the tyrant sword style, and it didn't require any technique. It only required one sword, and one could either dodge or take it head-on. Boom! The ground shook, and the 3 of them were sent flying with blood spurting out of their mouths. Among them, the spear-wielding Jin universe life form even broke a tree, and his body was almost broken into 2. Boom! 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 Without any pause, Yi-chan slashed out 3 times consecutively, and it was also the 4-elephant tyrant sword. In the next instant, everyone was sent flying. Not a single person could get close to Zachary. Even though Zachary was a tyrannical universe life form and was immune to most physical attacks, under the absolute suppression, he still couldn't withstand it and was directly sent flying. What? Meng Tuo and Zachary were shocked, and they suspected that they were hallucinating. Isn't he only a little stronger than me? Meng Tuo thought. Damn it, he had his strength. This strength is definitely at the quasi-demigod level. Zachary understood that he and Meng Tuo were both peak legendary supremes, and only quasi-demigods could suppress peak legendary supremes. If demigods didn't appear, quasi-demigods could be said to be invincible. In fact, there was an even more powerful existence above quasi-demigods, and that was heaven-defying supremes. Heaven-defying supremes weren't demigods, but they had the strength to contend against demigods. Yi-chan was undoubtedly a heaven-defying supremes. After finding Tuanzi, Yi-chan immediately set off with him. On the boundless sea, Yi-chan and Tuanzi were standing on a raft. Yi-chan didn't want to use the big boat. There was only one, and he would wait until the raft was used up. The weather on the sea changed suddenly. It was calm a moment ago, but the next moment, the wind was blowing, the waves were soaring, and the sky was covered with dark clouds, making it hard for people to breathe. Feeling that the raft wasn't stable, Yi-chan had to change to the big boat. The big boat was 100 meters long and 40 meters wide. The deck was very spacious, and the sail was made of animal skin, which was very strong. At this moment, the sail was taken down to welcome the storm. The big waves lifted the boat into the air for a while, and then submerged the boat. Tuanzi hid in the cabin, tightly holding the handle on the wall, and looked nervous. He wasn't Yi-chan, and if he fell into the sea, he would definitely die. Boom! A bolt of chaotic lightning illuminated the pitch-black space, striking the sea until it was smoking. Yi-chan had been standing at the bow of the boat, and the fiercely shaking boat couldn't throw him out. Admiring the storm on the sea of chaos, Yi-chan praised in his heart. He hadn't felt such an oppressive atmosphere for a long time. In the more than 20,000 years in the black-yellow universe, except for some challenges in the early stage, the middle and later stages were very peaceful, and his body seemed to be rusting. Duguju had always been longing for the battlefield of chaos, and in fact, he was also longing for it. On the sea, the waves were turbulent and the wind was raging. Under the sea, it was calm, and there was a hidden undercurrent. No one knew that a huge figure quietly came under the big boat. The storm on the Sea of Chaos was caused by natural causes, but there was actually another situation that could cause a storm. The level 6 chaos creature, Chaotic Thunder Whale. Once the Chaotic Thunder Whale wanted a hunt, it would form a storm. This kind of storm came and went as fast as lightning. Boom! A big hole appeared on Yi-chan's boat, and it flew high, almost hitting the clouds in the sky. On the way, it was broken into 2 parts, and the broken parts were flashing and crackling. Chapter 14:27. In midair, Yi-chan sized up the uninvited guest below. It was a huge blue and white whale with a single horn on its head. It was that horn that poked a hole in the ship, and its head smashed the ship into the sky, breaking it in half. However, what caught Yi-chan's attention was not the size of the whale, but the electric arcs on its body. If Yi-chan guessed correctly, this whale must have been born with the law of thunder. Comprehending the law of thunder was different from being born with the power of the law. The former had a wider range of application and was more lethal, while the latter could only be used unconsciously and treated as an instinct. Even so, the giant whale that was born with the law of thunder was not easy to deal with. Not to mention supremes, even beginner demigods would have to avoid it. It was not that they couldn't defeat it, but there was no need to fight it to the death. The whale was so huge, and it would be very difficult to kill it. Chaos Thunder Whale. On the half of the ship, Tuanzi looked at the blue and white whale with fear. The Chaos Thunder Whale was a level 6 chaotic creature, which was an existence that only beginner demigods could fight against. Half of the Chaos Thunder Whale's body was above the sea, waiting for the ship to land. Take this. Yi Chun took out Firmament Sword and slashed down with a Wave Sword. In an instant, boundless seawater and torrential rain converged together, transforming into a waterfall-like wave that surged down like a river. Immediately after, the waterfall transformed into a blue sword light, slashing down with boundless might. The Chaos Thunder Whale's eyes turned serious. It leaped out of the sea with all its might, and the horn on its head flickered with lightning as it headed toward the blue sword light. Boom! The electric arcs exploded, and water vapor filled the air. The Chaos Thunder Whale flew back and fell into the sea. The ship under Yi Chun's feet was instantly torn apart by the electric arcs and water vapor. Fortunately, he had the protection of the Black Tortoise sacred armor, so the remaining Law of Water and Law of Thunder couldn't hurt him. Seeing that Tuanzi and the other half of the ship were about to fall into the sea, Yi Chun had no choice but to use the Law of Water to form a water rope to wrap around Tuanzi and pull him over. Law of Water? Tuanzi felt like his brain was going blank. Yi Chun had actually comprehended the water rule. This was something that many high-level demigods could not do. Not intending to fight the primal Chaos Thunder Whale to the death, Yi Chun and Tuanzi's figures instantly turned transparent. They turned into two water men and flew out. Their speed was so fast that it surpassed the speed of sound. However, they were silent. It was the water movement technique. The water movement technique allowed Yi Chun to move freely in the primal chaos battlefield. Flying was also one of its abilities. Rumble. The seawater jumped and shook, and the chaotic thunder whale rushed out of the sea again. Unfortunately, Yi Chun and Tuanzi had already run far away, and not even their shadows could be seen. Unwilling to give up, the primal chaos thunder whale gradually sank into the sea. The raft fell into the water, and Yi Chun and Tuanzi landed on it. Yi Chun, you are so awesome. Tuanzi admired Yi Chun very much. If Yi Chun was a junior demigod, he wouldn't admire him so much. Don't flatter me. Next, we need to find some islands and build a new big ship. Yi Chun shook his head and sighed. The only big ship he had was scrapped after sitting on it for a short while. It was really unlucky. It seemed that he had to be more careful in the next storm. Primal chaos thunder whales were quite common in the Sea of Chaos. Drifting on the sea, more than 30 years had passed without them noticing. During these 30 years, nearly 200 rafts and 15 big ships had been destroyed. If it weren't for the fact that they would always encounter some islands along the way, Yi Chun and Tuanzi would have to swim across the sea. On this day, when the two passed by a lifeless volcanic island, a beam of golden light shot up from the center of the volcanic island. Primal Chaos Talisman? Yi Chun was surprised. This island wasn't very big. Logically speaking, the probability of a Primal Chaos Talisman appearing was very low. Tuanzi said, "You are really lucky. Primal Chaos Talisman doesn't necessarily appear in places with dense life in the universe. Some desolate places may also have Primal Chaos Talisman. In the later stages of the Primal Chaos battlefield, many people who don't have enough Primal Chaos Talisman will explore everywhere to find the missing Primal Chaos Talisman. If you're lucky, you can also collect all the Primal Chaos Talisman. You stay here. I'll be right back." Turning into a waterman, Yi Chun soared into the sky and skimmed towards the volcanic island. The water movement technique was very useful for Yi Chun. Without it, Yi Chun might have been eaten by the primal chaos thunder whale. Without the water movement technique, Yi Chun wouldn't be able to move freely on the vast sea. In a few blinks of an eye, Yi Chun appeared in the center of the volcanic island. It's a blue primal chaos talisman? Yi Chun's face revealed a surprised expression again. A supreme martial artist only needed to collect 99 golden primal chaos talisman in order. But a demigod needed to collect not only the golden primal chaos talisman, but also the 9 blue primal chaos talisman. Although the number of blue primal chaos talisman was far less than the golden primal chaos talisman, it was 10,000 times rarer than the golden primal chaos talisman. Wherever the blue primal chaos talisman appeared, it would definitely be accompanied by danger. Near this blue primal chaos talisman, Yi Chun found a huge flaming bird. It was a level 6 chaos creature, primal flaming bird. GA. As soon as Yi-Chun appeared, the primal flaming bird noticed Yi-Chun. With a shrill cry, the primal flaming bird opened its mouth and spat out fireballs at Yi-Chun. These fireballs were extremely fast, like red lasers. Boom! A dormant volcano was hit by the fireballs, and it suddenly exploded, turning into ashes. The surging waves of fire burned the sky red. Danger! Yi-Chun's heart quivered. This primal flaming bird was stronger than the primal chaos thunderwhale. At least it knew how to use the law of fire. Using the water movement technique again, Yi-Chun turned into a waterman and flew toward the sea. As for the blue primal chaos talisman, Yi-Chun didn't think about it. First, he wasn't a demigod yet, so he didn't need to collect all the blue primal chaos talisman. Secondly, with the primal flaming bird here, even a low-level demigod wouldn't be able to deal with it, let alone him. GA. What Yi-Chun did not expect happened. The primal flaming bird seemed to be proficient in the fire movement technique. Flames covered its body, and with a flap of its wings, it chased after Yi-Chun. Yi-Chun did not know that the level 6 chaos creatures guarding the blue primal chaos talisman were all top-notch level 6 chaos creatures. They were invincible under level 7. Sometimes, it was even level 7 chaos creatures that guarded the blue primal chaos talisman. One chased, and the other fled, and the two arrived at the vast sea. Yi-Chun's speed was obviously faster. After all, Yi-Chun was very proficient in the water movement technique. The primal flaming bird's half-baked fire movement technique could not be compared to him. Gradually, the primal flaming bird was left far behind. However, the primal flaming bird did not seem to be too far away from the blue primal chaos talisman. It quickly turned around and flew toward the volcano island. That was close. From afar, Yi-Chun let out a breath of turbid air. This primal flaming bird actually knew the fire movement technique. This was beyond his imagination. In fact, only a small portion of level 6 chaos creatures were born with the law of fire, such as the primal chaos thunderwhale, primal chaos flaming bird, and primal chaos vigorous whale. Those that knew how to use the law of fire were even fewer. This primal flaming bird was an anomaly. Yi-Chun guessed that this should be the primal flaming bird king. Chapter 1428. The Bird King's example told Yi-Chun that the first thing to do when he saw the blue chaos talisman in the future was not to collect it, but to run as far as possible. The chaotic ocean was boundless. Yi-Chun and Tuan-Zi drifted for another 20 years. They didn't know when they would find a continent. On a volcanic island far away from them, a one-eyed being arrived. The one-eyed being didn't understand the laws of nature, but he could ride the wind and wasn't restricted by the chaotic ocean. GA. The Bird King noticed the one-eyed being and attacked first. Its whole body was covered in flames. You're just a level 6 chaos creature. Get lost. The one-eyed being waved his hand, and the Bird King was sent flying. Countless burning feathers fell into the ocean. It's the number 4 blue chaos talisman. The blue chaos talisman landed on the one-eyed being's hand. There was a 4 written on it. Keeping the blue chaos talisman, the one-eyed being looked at the Bird King. This bird knew how to use the laws of nature. If he was just a beginner demigod, he wouldn't be its opponent. Demigods had a golden martial arts Yuan Shun, which could remove the gravitational pull of the chaotic battlefield. Their survival ability was many times higher than that of a supreme. The one-eyed being was too lazy to deal with the Bird King, so he left in a flash. However, the Bird King didn't appreciate it all. It used the fire travel technique and chased after him. Die! The one-eyed life form turned around and grabbed at the air with his right hand. Creak! A transparent hand appeared near the Chaos Flame Bird King and grabbed it. However, the one-eyed life form had miscalculated. The fire movement technique caused the Chaos Flame Bird King's body to transform into energy. As the transparent hand grabbed it, the Chaos Flame Bird King exploded and reformed into a physical body far away. The laws of nature are so amazing. The one-eyed being frowned. This was the first time he saw the laws of nature. He didn't expect it to be so difficult. Feeling that the Bird King was hard to deal with, the one-eyed being didn't want to fight it anymore. After all, even if he spent a lot of time to kill it, it wouldn't do him any good. Pushing his speed to the limit, the one-eyed being managed to shake off the Bird King. After losing the enemy and losing the blue Chaos Talisman, the Bird King didn't return to the volcanic island. Instead, it flew in another direction and killed a thunder whale to vent its anger. The chaotic ocean contained endless dangers. Yi Chun and Tuanzi were like rootless duckweeds, drifting around. In the beginning, the two of them were still talking and laughing, often communicating. Later on, the two of them went into seclusion, neither of them disturbing the other. Sometimes, they only spoke once every 2 or 3 months. Yi Chun realized that the primal chaos battlefield was a blessed land for cultivation. His martial arts primordial spirit had improved greatly in the spring of the future, but his foundation was still weak. He estimated that it would take tens of thousands of years for it to stabilize. He didn't expect that the primal chaos battlefield's primordial spirit would be especially nourishing. It's not impossible to become a demigod in 100,000 years. Before coming to the primal chaos battlefield, Yi Chun definitely wouldn't have such a thought. This was a sign. Of course, being a demigod was still too far away from Yi Chun. He would think about it in the future. 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. Yi Chun and Tuanzi had been drifting in the chaotic ocean for 300 years. Tuanzi didn't care. He wanted to go to the chaotic mainland to find a safe place and didn't want to take any risks. Now, it was quite safe to follow Yi Chun. As for when they would reach the mainland, it didn't matter. Yi Chun started to worry about Su Jing and Murong Qingqing. Heavenly Saint tools were both a blessing and a curse. They could help to block disasters, but they could also attract disasters. Let alone the two of them. Even Yi Chun didn't think that he could run amok in the primal chaos battlefield. He would still have to take a detour if he met a beginner demigod or intermediate demigod. In the 300 years, Yi Chun didn't come out empty-handed. Other than the number 27 Chaos Talisman, he also got a number 55 Chaos Talisman. According to Tuanzi, they were very lucky. In the 350th year, the two were surprised to find that there seemed to be more life forms in the universe nearby. In the past, they wouldn't see a life form in the universe for 8 to 10 years. In the 380th year, Yi Chun learned from a life form in the universe that the chaotic mainland was nearby. I've finally reached the mainland. Looking at the endless coastline, Yi Chun let out a sigh of relief. 380 years felt like 38,000 years to him. There were many ships coming and going. It was a prosperous scene. However, this prosperity was very abnormal. One could often see life forms killing each other. Blood spilled in the ocean. No one knew how many universes there were, and no one knew how many life forms had come to the primal chaos battlefield. Some universes seemed to have a blood feud with each other, killing each other on sight. You two, hand over your storage space. A huge ship approached. On the bow, a life form with a huge head said to Yi Chun and Tuanzi. Storage space was a rough idea. Mysterious Yellow Universe referred to storage rings, while Longby Universe referred to storage crystals. Either way, they all contained a space that could store objects. Get lost. Yi Chun didn't care about exposing his strength. If he didn't do so at this time, it would be troublesome. Activating the water rule, Yi Chun condensed a water ball in his hand and threw it out. In the next moment, a shock wave erupted, blasting the opponent's ship into pieces. Dozens of life forms were blasted away. Whether they died or not, Yi Chun didn't know, nor did he care. What he cared about was whether or not he could intimidate the surrounding life forms that were eyeing them covetously. Yi Chun's move of killing the chicken to warn the monkey indeed had an effect. When they fought, they jumped onto the opponent's ship and engaged in close combat. However, Yi Chun directly threw out a water ball and blew up the opponent's ship. They weren't on the same level at all. It's the water rule. Fortunately, we didn't provoke him. Another heaven-defying sovereign. They are both sovereigns, but the gap is so big. It's really unfair. Amidst the discussions of the other life forms, Yi Chun's ship sailed smoothly. Standing on the deck, Tuanzi felt very proud. In the past 380 years, countless battles for the primal chaos symbols had taken place in the primal chaos continent. With each battle, powerful people stood out. Not to mention demigods, there was nothing to compete with. There was already a great realm difference between them. The ones who were the focus of everyone's attention were the heaven-defying sovereigns. There were simply too many universes, and there were bound to be some shocking existences. Each one would not be the only one. Moreover, the number of universes that were more powerful than mysterious yellow cosmos were not few. Previously, Yi-chun had already encountered two, ancient multitude cosmos and sky tyrant cosmos. Presumably, there were even more universes. Therefore, the existence of heaven-defying sovereigns like Yi-chun was only natural. The primal chaos continent was very big. Just like the golden primal chaos symbol, it was divided into 90 regions. Each region was separated by a natural barrier. The region Yi-chun was heading to was the 48th region. Chapter 1429. The Chaos Land was extremely chaotic. Anyone who was suspected of possessing a golden chaos talisman would be hunted down. Those who were not strong enough would not be able to survive for 100,000 years. Along the way, Yi-chun saw dozens of killings that were even more chaotic and cruel than the ocean. Yi-chun was already used to it. The Chaos Land was not called the Chaos Land for nothing. Everyone would go crazy for the golden chaos talisman. Although the 48 regions were only one of the 99 regions in the Chaos Land, it was extremely vast. It was said that it would take 10 years to cross the entire 48 regions by foot. In the center of the 48 regions, there was a town called the Region Town. Every region had one. The Region Town could only accommodate 1,000 people at most. The others could stay in the town, but they would have to leave at night. There was a time limit for staying in the Region Town. After 10,000 years, they would not be able to stay anymore. Within 10,000 years, they would have to work every day, and they would have to pay 10 trillion yuan stones. The reason why it was so harsh was that killing was not allowed in the Region Town. Even demigods would not be able to kill anyone in the Region Town. As long as they did not leave the Region Town, they would be extremely safe. Luckily, I have prepared 10 trillion yuan stones. Tuanzi was not strong, but her wealth impressed Yi-chun. After paying 10 trillion yuan stones, Tuanzi officially became a member of the 48 Region Town. Currently, the Region Town was not full yet. After all, it was not easy to gather 10 trillion yuan stones. Besides, the Chaos Land was covered by the Chaos Law. Every move would consume energy very quickly. One would have to have enough yuan stones to replenish their energy. Otherwise, the energy would be depleted very quickly. Yi-chun, thank you for bringing me here. Thank you. Tuanzi said gratefully. It's nothing. Yi-chun said, oh right. What will you do after 10,000 years? A person could only stay in the Region Town for 10,000 years. After 10,000 years, they would still have to leave. I will take one step at a time. Actually, the number of life forms in the universe will be reduced by half. The outside world will not be as dangerous as it is now. As long as I am careful, I will have a high chance of surviving. Tuanzi said seriously. That's true. Yi-chun nodded. It was indeed the most dangerous time. There were too many life forms in the universe, and they were everywhere. See you in the future. Yi-chun said goodbye to Tuanzi and left the town. He couldn't hide in the town like Tuanzi did. He had to figure out the situation in the 48 domains first, and then see if he could find Su Jing and Murong Qingchun. In the 150th year after he arrived at the 48th region, countless golden lights soared into the sky, and a large number of golden chaos talismans appeared. All the universe life forms in the 48 domains went crazy as they fought for the golden chaos symbols. Yi-chun was no exception. Because the 48 domains were extremely vast, Yi-chun could only stare at the golden light. This time, he managed to snatch 2 golden chaos talismans. They were the number 7 and 33 chaos talismans. Fighting and killing were everywhere. A group of people passed by a python head peak. One of them glanced over and saw a person sitting cross-legged on the python head peak. Look, there's someone there. Intercept him. They were a gang that made a living by robbing others. Once they obtained a golden chaotic talisman, they would split it equally. This time, they would give it to you, and next time, they would give it to me. No one dared to be greedy. Do you want to die? Don't you know that the Python Head Peak is occupied by a heaven-defying supreme being? It's good enough that he didn't rob us. The other person was shocked and quickly stopped him. The person on the Python Head Peak was Yi-chun. After fighting for the Chaos Symbols several times, his reputation had spread. Basically, no one dared to provoke him. Some demigods didn't believe it and wanted to defeat Yi-chun to get his wealth. In the end, they were killed by Yi-chun. Since then, no one dared to go near the Python Head Peak anymore. However, Yi-chun felt that he wasn't strong enough. He needed to improve. After 500 years in the Chaos battlefield, his martial path primordial spirit had stabilized. He planned to break through to the Silver Peak level. This way, even if he encountered a mid-level demigod, he would have the confidence to escape. Therefore, while others were busy fighting, he was busy cultivating and using the chaos energy to nourish his martial path primordial spirit. Opening his eyes, Yi-chun thought to himself, I'm already quite famous in the 48 regions. I hope that Su Jing and Murong can get some information about me. Yi-chun had his reasons for being so flamboyant. It was very difficult for him to find the two of them by himself. Therefore, he planned to spread his name. In the 1000th year in the Chaos battlefield, a large number of golden Chaos symbols appeared in the 48 regions again. There were even 2 blue Chaos symbols, which led to a chaotic battle between several demigods. One of the demigods fell, and the scene was very shocking. Under normal circumstances, even a heaven-defying supreme being wouldn't dare to provoke a low-level demigod. After all, a heaven-defying supreme being could only fight against a low-level demigod if they went all out. In terms of endurance, a heaven-defying supreme being was much weaker than a low-level demigod. This time, Yi-chun's luck was good. The 3 golden chaos symbols weren't far from each other, and Yi-chun got them one by one. Currently, Yi-chun had a total of 7 golden chaos symbols, and none of them were duplicates. You want me to hand over the golden chaos symbols? Dream on. On an island in the 48 region lake, a metallic life form glared at the tentacle life form floating in the air. The metallic life form on the island was the same as Yi-chun, a heaven-defying supreme being. He comprehended the metal law and could condense a golden armor. Even a low-level demigod couldn't break through his defense. When fighting, he could condense a golden spear. Apart from a low-level demigod, no one could dodge his spear. If you don't hand it over, then die. The tentacle life form was a low-level demigod. His figure flashed, and the tentacles on his body instantly grew longer and thicker. They coiled around the metallic life form like pythons. Break for me. The metallic life form emitted a golden light as it condensed a golden armor to protect itself. Then, a golden light flashed in its hand, and a golden spear appeared. It swept the spear towards the tentacle life form. Crackle. The two fought fiercely, and the waves on the lake surged. In the end, the metallic life form died miserably, and the tentacle life form was heavily injured. When a heaven-defying supreme being erupted, it was hard for a low-level demigod not to be injured. If not for the fact that the metallic life form couldn't continuously use the metal law, the tentacle life form wouldn't even dare to say that he would have the last laugh. He had underestimated the heaven-defying supreme being. At the same time, the other demigods of the 48 regions were also looking for other heaven-defying supreme beings. Apart from demigods, the heaven-defying supreme beings obtained the most golden chaos symbols. Obtaining a heaven-defying supreme being's golden chaos symbol could save one many years of hard work. A low-level demigod also came to the Python Head Peak, where Yi-chun was at. This was a low-level demigod with a pig's head. His tusks were extremely long, like 2 large scimitars. He was over 3 meters tall, and his body was covered in a dark green shell. Hand over the golden chaos symbols, and I'll spare your life. The pig-headed life form shouted loudly. Yi-chun had already woken up from his cultivation. He sized up the pig-headed life form and frowned. Although you're a low-level demigod, you can't do anything to me. Shameless boasting. Since you don't want to hand them over, then die. Pulling out his tusks, the pig-headed life form charged towards Yi-Chun. Chapter 1430. Facing a beginner demigod, Yi-Chun did not dare to be careless. He pulled out the firmament sword and faced it head-on. Clink, clank, clank. Yi-Chun and the pig-headed being fought. The pig-headed being was a life form in an ordinary universe and had nothing special about him. However, a beginner demigod was a beginner demigod after all. His endurance was thousands of times longer than that of a heaven-defying supremacy. The more he fought, the fiercer he became. On the other hand, the heaven-defying supremacy had very strong explosive power, but his endurance was too poor. He could not activate the power of laws for a long time. In the eyes of many beginner demigods, no matter how abnormal the heaven-defying supremacy was, he was still a supremacy and could not compete with a beginner demigod. Holding a scimitar-like tusk in each hand, the pig-headed life form brandished both hands, creating countless blade lights that slashed at Yi-Chun. He wanted to suppress Yi-Chun until the latter couldn't use the power of law anymore. What made him heave a sigh of relief was that Yi-Chun didn't run. If the latter chose to run, with the power of law, he might really escape. The law of water was different from the other laws. Its power was endless and strong, but lacked explosive power. It was not as strong as the law of metal and not as heavy as the law of earth. Fortunately, Yi-Chun had the firmament sword in his hand. The firmament sword was a 3-star divine artifact. Its power was too strong. No matter how the pig-headed being attacked, Yi-Chun could always block it and fight back fiercely. It's the law of water. The pig-headed being frowned slightly. To be honest, among the 5 basic laws, he was most afraid of encountering the law of water. There were quite a few laws, and the 5 basic laws were relatively easy to comprehend. They were the 5 basic laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Among them, the metal law had the strongest explosive power, but it was a pity that it was too rigid and easy to break. If one couldn't defeat an enemy, there wouldn't even be a chance to turn the situation around. The wood law had an astonishing recovery ability, but it was lacking in explosive power. The fire law was very similar to the metal law in that it had an extremely strong explosive power, but its weakness was its defense. Among the 5 basic laws, the fire law had the weakest defense. As for the earth law, it was very stable and specialized in defense. However, being stable also meant that it was mediocre. Only the law of water was the most balanced. Although its explosive power was not as strong as the law of gold and the law of fire, it surpassed the law of wood and the law of earth. In terms of recovery, it was not as strong as the law of wood, but it surpassed the other 4 laws. In terms of steadiness, it was not as strong as the law of earth, but it still surpassed the other 4 laws. It could be said that it had no weaknesses. Most importantly, the law of water, the law of fire, and the law of earth were extremely powerful in terms of escaping. The law of water had the water movement technique, the law of fire had the fire movement technique, and the law of earth had the earth movement technique. I hope he didn't comprehend the water movement technique. The pig-headed creature thought to himself, as expected of a low-level demigod. None of them are easy to deal with. This was Yi-Chun's second time fighting a low-level demigod. If the demon Saint Kalo's combat power was 100, then the pig-headed creature's combat power was at least 95. Yi-Chun could only maintain the situation at most, but he would not be able to gain the upper hand at all. Sword of Hell. A blood-red sword shadow shot out from Yi-Chun's right eye. It was the soul will attack secret art, Sword of Hell. After so many years of modification, the power of the Sword of Hell was even greater. Yi-Chun wanted to see if it could affect a low-level demigod. The pig-headed creature could not dodge the blood-red sword shadow in time, so he could only strengthen his soul defense. Buzz. The next moment, the pig-headed creature felt as if his head had been shaken by time and space, and he stood there in a daze. Now's the time. Yi-Chun held the sword with both hands and slashed at the pig-headed creature with the Sword of Waves. Boom! The torrential water turned into a blue sword light and slashed at the pig-headed creature's chest. Puff! Blood splattered, and a deep sword mark appeared on the pig-headed creature's chest. As expected, Yi-Chun shook his head. His maximum attack power could only injure low-level demigods, and he could not kill them with a single strike. In other words, if the battle dragged on, most heaven-defying paragons would die without a doubt. There was no chance of victory at all. His body turned transparent, and Yi Chun turned into a waterman and flew backward. His speed instantly surpassed the speed of sound, and he was completely silent. Trying to run? The pig-headed creature woke up, and he roared angrily. The fong in his right hand shot out. Swish! A sonic boom rang out, and the saber-like fong slashed out a white mark in the void, shooting at Yi Chun. Unfortunately, Yi Chun was a waterman at this moment, and the fong passed through Yi Chun's body. Not long later, Yi Chun disappeared into the deep mountains. Damn it! The pig-headed creature's face was gloomy. He had thought that killing a heaven-defying paragon would be a piece of cake, but he did not expect that he had worked so hard for nothing. What angered him the most was that he had actually been injured. This was simply unforgivable. Terrifying. Is this the strength of a low-level demigod? It's impossible to resist. Near the battlefield, some universe beings were watching quietly, and they were all trembling with fear. Of course, low-level demigods are not people we can fight, but this Green Lotus swordsman was able to escape from the Tusk battle, sane and scathed, and even injured the Tusk battle sane a little. This is unbelievable. Every heaven-defying paragon has their own strength, which is beyond the imagination of ordinary people. As time passed, the titles of heaven-defying paragon and demigod began to spread. Everyone knew that the heaven-defying paragon who lived on the Python Head Peak was Green Lotus swordsman. Hundreds of miles away, Yi Chun slowly exhaled and thought to himself, "My strength is still too low. I can't even beat a low-level demigod. It would be great if my martial yuan soul could break through to the peak silver level." For a paragon, the improvement of his martial yuan soul from the high-level silver level to the peak silver level would be a huge increase in strength. One was a high-level legendary paragon, and the other was a peak legendary paragon. However, Yi Chun usually compared himself with low-level demigods, so the improvement of his martial yuan soul to the peak silver level was not very significant, and he still had to hide from low-level demigods. However, the improvement of the martial yuan soul had one advantage, which was that it could prolong the time he could use the law of water. Yi Chun estimated that the peak silver level martial yuan soul could prolong the time he could use the law of water by at least 10 times. In a forest, a low-level demigod was chasing after a heaven-defying paragon. This low-level demigod had a pair of saber arms, and when he waved them, a terrifying saber chi rushed out and destroyed the forest. The heaven-defying paragon in front of him was a faint green shadow. His body was cut into pieces by the saber chi, but it recovered quickly and continued to run. If someone was here, they would naturally be able to see that this heaven-defying paragon was comprehending the law of wood, which was second to none in terms of recovery. As long as the paragon could continue to use the law of wood, it was basically impossible to kill him. However, the heaven-defying paragon could only use the law for a limited time. After 10 minutes, the green shadow could no longer maintain the power of the law, and the green shadow dissipated, turning into a cosmic creature with a beard. It was cut into hundreds of pieces by the saber chi, and it could not be more dead. Chapter 1431. In a short span of 10 years, 6 heaven-defying supremes of the 48 regions had died, and only Yi Chun had survived. This frightened many demigods. The number of heaven-defying supremes was much less than that of demigods. If all the heaven-defying supremes were killed, wouldn't it be their turn? Of course, Yi Chun's survival also shocked everyone. They were all heaven-defying supremes, but there was actually someone who could escape unscathed from the hands of a demigod. Fong, you're such a coward. You let us supremes escape. The 48 domains were very big for supremes, but they weren't very big for demigods. If they flew at full speed, they would be able to traverse the entire 48 domains in about 1 or 2 months. Normally, some demigods like to gather together and chat. The Fong Sage was not convinced. What do you know? That Green Lotus swordsman is not normal. He has mastered the law of water, which has no weaknesses. He also has a soul attack secret art. If it were you, you would not be able to take him down. I can only say that I am unlucky to have encountered such a difficult opponent. The law of water? It is indeed a bit difficult. Hearing this, the other demigods nodded. Among the 5 fundamental laws, the law of water was very balanced in all aspects and did not have any major shortcomings. Among the 6 supremes they had killed, 2 of them had comprehended the law of gold, 3 of them had comprehended the law of wood, and 1 of them had comprehended the law of fire. However, the supremes who had comprehended the law of fire had been rather unlucky. He had encountered a beginner demigod thunder battle saint who was very good at speed and was unable to escape. Otherwise, with his fire traversing technique, an ordinary beginner demigod would not have been able to catch him. Thunder steps. Arcs of lightning flashed in the air, and a figure chased after the waterman at lightning speed. The waterman was Yi Chun, and the one chasing him was the Thunder Battle Sage from the Thunder Universe. The Thunder Battle Sage's strength was similar to the Fong Sage's, maybe even slightly weaker. However, the Thunder Battle Sage's speed was many times faster than the Fong Sage's. Trouble. Yi Chun frowned. It had been 400 years since he had been chased by the Tusk Battle Saint. During that time, Yi Chun had been cultivating wholeheartedly and had not shown himself. It was only when the chaos symbols appeared on a large scale that Yi Chun showed himself. He did not expect the Thunder Battle Saint to be nearby. The water movement technique was even faster than the other party's thunder steps. However, it was impossible to shake off the other party in a short amount of time. After all, this was not the universe, but the primal chaos battlefield. His speed was greatly reduced. Let's see how long you can run. Thunder Battle Saint was not in a hurry as he followed closely behind Yi Chun. He knew very well that there was a time limit for the heaven-defying Supreme to use the power of law. Once the time limit was up, he would no longer be a heaven-defying Supreme and would no longer have the power to challenge a low-level demigod. After a quarter of an hour, Yi Chun felt his soul sea boiling. This was a sign that his soul sea couldn't withstand the law power. There's a lake in front. Suddenly, Yi Chun's eyes brightened. At the end of his sight, there was a vast expanse of whiteness and dazzling light. It was a huge lake. As long as there was a lake, Yi Chun would have a chance to survive. The law of water would become stronger in contact with water, and it would be easier for him to hide. Not good. The Thunder Battle Sage was anxious. He had finally forced Yi Chun to the edge, but who would have thought that a lake would appear at this moment? A heaven-defying Supreme who had comprehended the law of water would be like a dragon returning to the sea. Thunder Prison. The Thunder Battle Sage roared and formed a seal with both hands. An impenetrable thunder prison descended from the sky and enveloped Yi Chun. Unfortunately, the waterman could not be restrained by a thunder prison. Electric arcs flashed as Yi Chun passed through the thunder prison's barrier and rushed toward the lake without slowing down. After a dozen breaths, Yi Chun dove into the lake and disappeared from the Thunder Battle Sage's sight. Rumble. The Thunder Battle Saint followed closely behind. The powerful impact raised huge waves on the surface of the lake, causing water pillars to shoot up. However, he was one step too late and could not see anything. The waterman had entered the water and entered a completely invisible state. Even soul power could not detect him. To a certain extent, Yi Chun had already turned into water and was no different from the lake. Unless the Thunder Battle Saint completely destroyed the entire lake, he would not be able to find Yi Chun. After a long time, the Thunder Battle Sage jumped out of the lake. Looking at the endless lake, he frowned. If the lake was a little smaller, he could totally guard here. But this lake was too big, and guarding here would be useless. It would be a waste of time. Count yourself lucky. The Thunder Battle Sage turned around and left. The moment he entered the lake, Yi Chun quickly swam forward. The water movement art had pushed his speed to the limit. He was even faster than flying in the air. After swimming for about 10 miles, the water movement art was forced to stop, and Yi Chun's speed was reduced by 1,000 times. Fortunately, the Thunder Battle Sage had been left far behind. Of course, Yi Chun didn't rush to the surface. He continued to swim in the water. After 2 hours, Yi Chun floated to the surface. Looking around, it was all white, and he couldn't see the shore anymore. That was close. Yi Chun wiped his face. He wasn't afraid of the powerful primary demigods, but he was afraid of the fast primary demigods. I have to improve my martial Yuan Shun to the peak silver level. Yi Chun made up his mind. Before his martial Yuan Shun broke through, he wouldn't come out. He was lucky this time, but he might not be so lucky next time. After spending 3 days, Yi Chun reached the shore and found a hidden place to start his training. 100 years passed. 200 years passed. 500 years passed. In the 505th year, the chaos runes appeared on a large scale again. But this time, Yi Chun didn't show up. It was as if he had disappeared from the 48 regions. How cautious. Some demigods didn't hear any news about Yi Chun, and they were a bit depressed. Yi Chun had at least 10 chaos runes on him, and he was in high demand. Apart from Yi Chun, all the heaven-defying supremes in the 48 regions were captured. Next, it was the demigods' turn to be unlucky. They were all robbed, and the lucky ones might survive. As for supremes below the demigod level, they only had 1 or 2 chaos runes on them, and some didn't even have any. Demigods couldn't be bothered to rob them. After all, there were too many targets. In the blink of an eye, it had been 2,500 years since Yi Chun came to the chaos battlefield. On this day, a dazzling silver light appeared in the mountains. The next moment, a figure floated out like a silver sun, illuminating everything. Finally reached the peak silver level, and the Heartsword realm has also broken through to the perfect level. Yi Chun opened his eyes, and the silver light on his body was restrained. During this training, not only did Yi Chun's martial Yuan Shun break through to the peak silver level, but his heart force also reached the perfect level. The perfect level of heart force surprised Yi Chun quite a bit. First, his heart force was strong, and his strength was even stronger. Second, his heart force could actually prolong the time he could use the power of laws. When combined with the peak silver level martial Yuan Shun, the time could be extended by more than 100 times. Chapter 1432. With my current strength, I wonder if I can defeat the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. A thought emerged in Yi Chun's mind. Before the breakthrough, once Yi Chun activated the Rule of Water, his strength would be similar to that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that his primordial spirit had broken through to the peak silver level, Yi Chun's strength was instantly 1 level higher than that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that his primordial spirit had broken through to the peak silver level, Yi Chun's strength was once again 1 level higher than that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that his heart power had entered the consummate realm, his strength was once again 1 level higher than that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that he was 2 levels higher, Yi Chun didn't think that the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage could compete with him. They would definitely be suppressed in all aspects. The only question now was whether he could seriously wound or even kill the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. They were strong and weak beginner demigods. Yi Chun still wasn't a match for the truly strong beginner demigods. For example, Yi Chun definitely wasn't a match for the Chaos Flaming Bird King. The Chaos Flaming Bird King was roughly equivalent to the top beginner demigods. With a thought, Yi Chun turned into a waterman and shot out soundlessly. His speed was close to Mach 2. With my current speed, even the Thunder Battle Saint can't catch up to me. Yi Chun's guess was right. His martial primordial spirit had broken through to the pinnacle of the silver level, and the speed at which he could perform the water travel technique had become even faster. The higher his cultivation, the more powerful the power of the rule would be. On the 2700th year since they arrived at the Primal Chaos battlefield, a large number of Primal Chaos runes appeared once again. In the entire 48 regions, hundreds of golden light pillars soared into the sky. With Yi Chun's eyesight, he could see 3 golden light pillars. Yi Chun first rushed towards a golden light pillar closest to him. It's revered swordsman Green Lotus. He has appeared. There were too many supreme beings fighting over the primal chaos talisman. The moment Yi Chun appeared, he immediately became the center of attention. Of course, everyone stopped fighting over the primal chaos talisman. Fighting over the primal chaos talisman with Yi Chun was simply courting death. After obtaining a chaos talisman, Yi Chun turned into a waterman and flew towards the second golden light pillar at an incredible speed. In less than a month, the news of Sword Venerable Green Lotus appearing somewhere spread throughout the 48 regions. You finally appeared. Let's see where you can run this time. The Thunder Battle Saint sneered and flew in the direction of Yi Chun. As for the other demigods who felt that they could not keep Yi Chun here, they did not join in the fun. After 4 or 5 days, Thunder Battle Saint arrived at the place where Yi Chun had appeared before. I think he went deep into the mountains. One of the captured supreme beings said with a trembling voice. Leaving this supreme martial artist behind, the Thunder Battle Saint flew deep into the mountains. His golden soul power scanned the surroundings, and everything within a 10-mile radius was within his scanning range. Found it! Finally, the Thunder Battle Saint discovered Yi Chun. At the same time that the Thunder Battle Sage discovered Yi Chun also sensed the Thunder Battle Sage arrival. It should be known that Yi Chun's soul was also a golden soul. Although his scanning range was much smaller than the Thunder Battle Sage's, once he was scanned, he could still immediately discover who the newcomer was. They're finally here. Yi Chun didn't run away and slowly stood up. Not running away. Thunder Battle Saint's brows twitched, but he soon sneered. He could tell that Yi Chun's aura had become much more tyrannical, which meant that his cultivation base had improved. Unfortunately, even if Yi Chun's cultivation base had improved, he could only suppress him at most. It was impossible for him to pose any threat to him. As time went on, the backlash from the power of Tao would be too much to bear. Thunder Battle Sage, it seems that you've already regarded me as your prey. You're very confident, Yi Chun said. That's right. You were lucky that you managed to escape last time. Let's see if you'll be so lucky this time. The Thunder Battle Sage stopped 100 meters away. Aren't you afraid that the prey will backfire on the hunter? Pulling out the firmament sword, Yi Chun was ready to go. As long as the hunter is not careless, this day will never come. The Thunder Battle Sage stared at Yi Chun's firmament sword. The reason why he continued to chase Yi Chun was because of the Heavenly Saint weapon in Yi Chun's hands. If that's the case, let's see if you're qualified to be the hunter. Yi Chun's figure flashed, and he slashed at the Thunder Battle Sage. Good timing. The Thunder Battle Sage weapon was a sledgehammer. As electric arcs filled the air, the Thunder Battle Sage met the attack with a hammer. Clang! The electric net spread along with the ripples. The Thunder Battle Sage spat out a mouthful of blood, and his entire body flew backward. On the other hand, Yi Chun's body only shook a little. How is this possible? The Thunder Battle Sage was so shocked that he forgot the pain. The truth is so cruel. Now, I'm a hunter. Holding the firmament sword, Yi Chun followed closely and slashed again. Clang! The Thunder Battle Sage spat out another mouthful of blood. With a fierce expression, the Thunder Battle Sage said hatefully, "Although you're much stronger than me, I don't believe that you can keep going." A demigod had a gold pugilist yuan soul, which had a strong recovery ability. As long as it didn't exceed the limit, no matter how serious the injury was, it could recover. Every time Yi Chun swung his sword, he could make the Thunder Battle Sage spit out blood. From beginning to end, he was suppressing the Thunder Battle Sage. However, what surprised Yi Chun was that although the Thunder Battle Sage was injured again and again, his combat strength didn't decrease. Every time he was injured, a layer of golden light flashed around his body, and the next moment, his injuries recovered rapidly. Is this the gold pugilist yuan soul? Yi Chun exclaimed. Speaking of the gold pugilist yuan soul, one must talk about the immortal power. If the yuan soul wanted to break through to the gold level, the immortal power must be very powerful, and the immortal power came from the rank 9 spirit body. When the gold pugilist yuan soul was formed, it replaced the immortal power, or in other words, the two merged into one. Therefore, the gold pugilist yuan soul was of a higher level than the immortal power, and its recovery ability was more powerful. Of course, the gold pugilist yuan soul wasn't omnipotent. When the damage it endured reached a limit, the physical body would still collapse. For example, the White Pole Sword Saint and Demon Saint Gamma lost their physical bodies, and it took many years to rebuild them. To prevent the physical body from collapsing so easily, one had to improve the spiritual body, such as the late rank 9, peak rank 9, or even perfect rank 9. The body refining level also needed to be improved, but most cosmic life forms couldn't balance both aspects. After a quarter of an hour, Yi Chen's attacks became more and more violent. The Thunder Battle Sage felt his body's reaction slow down, which was a sign that the damage he could endure was approaching the limit. The Thunder Battle Sage felt that something was wrong. He saw a strong confidence in Yi Chen's eyes, and this confidence couldn't be faked. Run! The Thunder Battle Sage didn't want to lose his physical body. Although his strength wouldn't drop too much if he lost his physical body, it was equivalent to exposing his martial pugilist Yuan soul to the outside world, which would make it easier for him to be injured. Unfortunately, although the Thunder Battle Sage was fast, Yi Chen's water travel technique was faster. Boom! The Thunder Battle Sage's physical body collapsed, turning into dust, and the gold pugilist Yuan soul was exposed. After losing his physical body, the Thunder Battle Sage seemed to have lost his restraints, and his speed increased again. However, Yi Chen clearly didn't want to let him go, and he continued to chase after him, slashing out with the Firmament Sword. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, let's talk this out. As long as you let me go, I promise not to provoke you in the future. I believe you also don't want to offend an elementary demigod. The Thunder Battle Sage was anxious, and he hurriedly said, "You must die today." Apart from revenge, Yi Chen also wanted the Thunder Battle Sage's Chaos Talisman. He couldn't waste his time on collecting Chaos Talismans, and robbing was obviously faster. Chapter 1433. Yi Chen's speed was even faster than the Thunder Battle Saint, who had lost his physical body. His sky sword continued to slash out. Although he couldn't force out sword chi like a demigod, the sword light condensed from the law of water was countless times sharper than the ordinary sword chi. Soundlessly, it landed on the Thunder Battle Saint's body. The martial path Yuan spirit became dimmer and dimmer, and the Thunder Battle Saint felt a strong fear. He didn't want to die. With the gold martial path Yuan spirit, his life was close to eternal, and it was not worth it to die now. I'll fight you to the death. At this time, the Thunder Battle Saint knew very well that escaping was a dead end. Only by fighting to the death would there be a glimmer of hope for survival. He, who had lost his physical body, seemed to be freed from gravity. He suddenly turned around and pounced at Yi Chen. The dark sledgehammer was filled with blazing arcs of lightning, and it smashed at Yi Chen again and again. Fighting to the death. Yi Chen didn't dodge, and his strength rose to at least a level. The Thunder Battle Saint, who was fighting to the death, was indeed very powerful. His strength had increased by at least a level. If a heaven-defying supreme could burst out, so could a demigod, but the price was the loss of the martial path Yuan spirit. A demigod would not fight to the death like this unless it was the last resort. Every bit of the martial path Yuan spirit was lost would reduce his strength in the future, and if it was lost too much, it would be impossible to recover forever. Go to hell. After taking 4 or 5 strikes from Yi Chen, the Thunder Battle Saint smashed his hammer on Yi Chen's chest. With a pop, Yi Chen's chest rippled, and the next moment, the ripples dissipated and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Yi Chen's whole body flew out, and his blood boiled. Before understanding the law of water, even if Yi Chen cultivated the immortal sword body to the 16th level, even if he wore the black tortoise sacred armor, he would not be able to block the Thunder Battle Saint's attack. He would inevitably be seriously injured, and his origin would be damaged. However, after understanding the law of water, Yi Chen stimulated the black tortoise sacred armor to a higher level. The Firmament Sword contained the law of water, the law of wind, and the law of space, while the black tortoise sacred armor contained the law of earth and the law of water. After understanding the law of water, Yi Chen could already stimulate the law of water in the black tortoise sacred armor, which was like having a suit of water. Yi Chen could tell that the Thunder Battle Saint would risk his life to take a few of his sword strikes, and attack him. So, Yi Chen decided to beat him at his own game. Taking advantage of his opponent's impatience, he slashed out a few times. Although he was struck by his opponent's hammer, Yi Chen was 100% sure that he would be able to take it, and the sword strikes would be for nothing. Impossible. Seeing that he could not hurt Yi Chen, the Thunder Battle Saint looked desperate. After taking a few strikes from Yi Chen, his injuries had worsened several times. It should be known that before, he was injured by the shockwave, and now he had to take a few strikes. After half an hour, the Thunder Battle Saint roared, "I can't accept this." Immediately afterward, the Thunder Battle Saint's gold yuan shun collapsed and completely disintegrated. It was as if a golden sun had flashed in the sky and disappeared completely. It really wasn't easy. Yi Chen let out a heavy breath. Demigods were too difficult to kill. He had been suppressing his opponent from the beginning to the end, and every strike could injure him, but it still took him a whole hour to kill him. If he was only one level stronger than his opponent, he would probably not be able to kill him even after 3 days and 3 nights. The Gold Yuan Shun was also known as the Eternal Yuan Shun. Once one reached the demigod level, their Yuan Shun would break through to the gold rank, and their vitality would be extremely tenacious. In a situation where the strength was about the same, there would not be a situation where one side would die, unless they were determined to die. Only when there was a huge difference in strength would one be able to kill the other. For example, Yi Chen was 2 levels stronger than the Thunder Battle Saint. After the Thunder Battle Saint died, Yi Chen also obtained his storage ring, which was similar to a storage ring used to store things. Erasing his opponent's soul imprint, Yi Chen looked into the depths of the ring. There were a total of 35 gold chaos symbols and 1 blue chaos symbol. Among the gold chaos symbols, 7 were duplicates and 28 were non-duplicates. And among these 28 non-duplicates, 5 were duplicates of Yi Chen's 13 gold chaos symbols. Counting like this, Yi Chen had about 36 non-duplicates of gold chaos symbols. More than 1/3. Yi Chen nodded in satisfaction. It had only been 2,700 years, so he had plenty of time. Glancing at the blue chaos symbol, Yi Chen had an idea. Perhaps he could collect some blue chaos symbols. If he were to break through to the demigod realm without enough blue chaos symbols, it would be such a waste. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, you are too ruthless. You won't have a good ending either. The Tusk Battle Saint was chased by Yi Chen to the point where there was no way out. Even the Thunder Battle Saint could not escape from Yi Chen, not to mention him. However, in comparison, the Tusk Battle Saint was even harder to deal with than the Thunder Battle Saint. Apart from being faster than the Tusk Battle Saint, the latter was not as good as the latter in every other aspect. His strength is a bit higher than the Thunder Battle Saint, and his defense is also a bit higher. After spending a whole 6 hours, Yi Chen finally killed the Tusk Battle Saint. After obtaining the Tusk Battle Saint's wealth, Yi Chen now had 75 gold chaos symbols, 1 blue chaos symbol, and 48 non-duplicates of gold chaos symbols, which was close to half of his 99 gold chaos symbols. Collecting them is too fast. After killing 2 beginner demigods, Yi Chen had saved at least thousands or even tens of thousands of years. If he killed a few more, he might be able to collect all the gold chaos symbols. However, this was just wishful thinking. Yi Chen realized that the gold chaos symbols that everyone obtained were usually ranked at the top. The lower the rank, the rarer the gold chaos symbols. For example, among the 48 non-duplicates of gold chaos symbols, there were 32 gold chaos symbols before number 50, 40 gold chaos symbols before number 60, 45 gold chaos symbols before number 70, 48 gold chaos symbols before number 80, and none after number 80. Moreover, the Thunder Battle Saint and the Tusk Battle Saint's gold chaos symbols had a high repetition rate. There were 27 gold chaos symbols in Yi Chen's hands, and some of them were even repeated multiple times. The news of the Thunder Battle Saint's death did not have time to spread. After the Tusk Battle Saint's death, the news finally reached the other demigods, which caused them to panic. There were no mid-level demigods in the 48 regions, nor were there any top-level demigods. Unless they teamed up, no one had the confidence to defeat Yi Chen in a one-on-one fight. Since Yi Chun could even kill the Thunder Battle Saint, who was the fastest among them, it meant that he was extremely fast. It was impossible to escape. Even if they teamed up, they would not be able to collect all the gold chaos symbols in 100,000 years. The only way was to leave the 48 regions and go to other regions. What happened next shocked all the beings in the 48 regions. The demigods left one after another. Of course, Yi Chun was nowhere to be found. It seemed that he had also left the 48 regions. The turbulent 48 regions suddenly became a paradise for the Supremes. Although the demigods were powerful, they were still Supremes. Supremes could not fly, and they could not come and go like the wind. Most of the Supremes usually stayed in one region, because they were familiar with it. Chapter 1434. Yi Chun had indeed left the 48th region. The reason why he didn't leave before was that he couldn't activate the law of water for long. He could only walk and couldn't fly. Naturally, he left the 48th region to look for Su Jing and Murong Qingqing. To be honest, it was too difficult to find people in the Primal Chaos battlefield. Perhaps the two weren't in the Primal Chaos continent and were on some island in the Primal Chaos Sea. Yi Chun could only try his luck. He was glad that he gave him a set of Heavenly Saint tools. Otherwise, their chances of survival would be very small. There was a natural barrier between regions. Of course, the so-called natural barrier was only for Supremes. After leaving the 48th region, Yi Chun came to the neighboring region, the 49th region. Yi Chun couldn't find the two in the 49th region. He didn't leave the 49th region immediately. Although Yi Chun was sure that the two would choose to live in the region town, he couldn't rule out the possibility that the population of the region town was already full. Therefore, Yi Chun had to ask around the 49th region to see if anyone had seen them. Have you seen these two? On a certain mountain peak in the 49th region, Yi Chun grabbed a quasi-demigod and activated the law of water to condense a water mirror in the void. The image of Su Jing and Murong Qingqing appeared in the mirror. No. The quasi-demigod was so scared that he stuttered. You didn't lie to me? Yi Chun's eyes turned sharp. I really didn't, I swear. The quasi-demigod hurriedly swore. Seeing that the other party didn't lie to him, Yi Chun's figure flashed and turned into a waterman. They are both Supremes, but the gap is too big. The quasi-demigod was scared and envious. The overpowered cultivators of the 49 regions were basically all killed by demigods. Since Yi Chun was looking for someone, it could be ruled out that he was one of the overpowered cultivators of the 49 regions. Thinking of Yi Chun rushing here from another region, the quasi-demigod couldn't help but feel scared. This kind of overpowered cultivator who could travel long distances was definitely a true powerhouse. He couldn't be provoked. After spending a total of 30 years, Yi Chun finally swept the 49 regions once. Unfortunately, no one had seen Su Jing and Murong Qingqing. During this period, he even fought with a beginner demigod. The result was self-evident. Yi Chun had 55 unique golden chaos talismans. 50 domains, 51 domains, 52 domains. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years had passed. On this day, Yi Chun arrived at the 54 domains. Unfortunately, 5 golden pillars of light appeared in all directions and shot into the sky. What a coincidence! The number of golden chaos talismans in each domain was different. Even in the same domain, the interval was different. It all depended on luck. In a flash, Yi Chun dashed towards the nearest golden pillar of light. As the number of golden chaos talismans increased, Yi Chun gradually understood that the number of golden chaos talismans at the end were fewer. No matter how many golden chaos talismans you got at the beginning, it was useless without the golden chaos talismans at the end. It was a cruel thing. Countless beings in the universe fought hard on the chaos battlefield, but only a small portion of them could gather all the golden chaos talismans. Yi Chun was lucky. Among the 2 golden chaos talismans, one was not a duplicate. Now, Yi Chun was heading towards the place where the 3rd golden pillar appeared. At the same time, another being in the universe was also heading in this direction. It was a humanoid being. Its entire body looked like it was made of black metal. Its eyes glowed red, giving off a ruthless feeling. From afar, Yi Chen saw a group of beings in an intense battle. No one could get close to the golden chaos talismans. To most of the Supremes, snatching the golden chaos talismans was a technical task. They could not fly. Therefore, unless they were strong enough, it was impossible to get the golden chaos talismans in a short time. Extending his body, Yi Chen silently arrived at the scene and grabbed the golden chaos talisman. It's the 88th golden chaos talisman. Yi Chen was delighted. The 88th golden chaos talisman was at the end, and it was the first one he got. Leave the golden chaos talisman. A cold metallic voice came from afar. The Supremes looked like they were in pain. This voice was like a sharp awl, piercing their eardrums and souls. It's the Steel Supremacy. He's here. What's the point of fighting? Once the Steel Supremacy is here, even demigods won't stand a chance. The 54 Dominions had experienced a bloodbath. Most of the heaven-defying Supremes had been killed by the demigods. Only one heaven-defying supremacy had survived. This heaven-defying supremacy was the Iron and Blood Universe's supremacy of steel. He had comprehended the law of gold. His combat power was extremely powerful, and his defense was also astonishing. Even if the primary demigods of the 54 Dominions joined forces, they would not be able to kill him. The Supremes of the 54 Dominions secretly called him the King of the 54 Dominions, meaning the strongest person in the 54 Dominions. Yi Chen looked up and saw a metallic life form shooting towards him. To be able to survive, he must be an incredible supremacy. Although they were all Supremes, there were differences between them. Generally speaking, as long as one mastered the power of the rule of gold, he would be a supremacy. However, there were differences in the strength of the Supremes. A weaker supremacy could only exchange a few blows with the weakest demigod, while a stronger supremacy could kill a demigod. That was the difference. I see. He has the cultivation of a demigod. When a metallic life form stopped, Yi Chen realized that the opponent's cultivation was very high. He had reached the demigod level. Above the Silver Peak Primordial Spirit was the Gold Martial Primordial Spirit, which corresponded to the cultivation of a demigod. You might have the strength of a demigod, but you might not have the cultivation of a demigod. For example, Yi Chen's Martial Primordial Spirit was at the Silver Peak Primordial Spirit, which was the peak of the legendary supremacy. However, the opponent was a demigod, which was a level higher than Yi Chen. Don't underestimate this level. The higher the level of a Martial Primordial Spirit, the longer it would take to use the power of the rule of gold. Yi Chen estimated that the opponent's time to use the power of the rule of gold might not be shorter than his. After all, once the Martial Primordial Spirit reached the gold level, there would be a qualitative change. In short, the opponent was a demigod and a supremacy. However, he was much stronger than the ordinary supremacy. Hand over all the chaos talismans, and I'll spare your life. Supremacy of Steel sized up Yi Chen. He had never seen Yi Chen before and guessed that he was a supremacy from another domain. It was precisely because Yi Chen was a supremacy that he was willing to spare Yi Chen's life. If it were any other supremacy or demigod, he would have made his move long ago. This was all because of his absolute strength. There's no reason for me to hand over what's in my hands. Yi Chen was not afraid of the opponent. You dominate the 54th domain, but I'm not weaker than you in the 48th domain. We're on the same level. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Supremacy of Steel's body glowed with a layer of golden light, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. Golden armor, golden spear. There's going to be a good show. A supremacy versus a supremacy. I wonder who's stronger. You're talking nonsense. Supremacy of Steel is the king of our 54th domain. I don't think there are many supremacy who can compete with him. Chapter 1435. Facing the Steel Supremacy, Yi Chen did not dare to be careless. The Metal Supremacy was the most lethal of the 5 basic laws. Even the Fire Supremacy could not compare to it, let alone the Water Supremacy. The surrounding air gradually became moist, and a layer of water appeared on the surface of Yi Chen's skin. This was not an ability that Yi Chen had comprehended, but a function of the black tortoise sacred armor itself. Among the 5 basic laws, only the metal supremacy and the earth supremacy could form armor. Although the other laws could also forcefully form a layer of the supremacy, the effect was far inferior, and it would affect other abilities. Not only was there a layer of water on the surface of his skin, but the firmament that Yi Chun had drawn also had a layer of water on it. Both of them contained the water supremacy. Kill. The steel supremacy was the first to attack. In a flash, he stabbed with his spear. The blinding golden light was like a golden waterfall across the sky, giving the illusion that it was unstoppable. Yi Chun had long been ready. The firmament swept across, and the void in front of him surged. The blue sword gleam met the golden waterfall, and an intense sound of metal clashing erupted. However, Yi Chun had still underestimated the power of the steel supremacy and the metal supremacy. As the sword and spear clashed, Yi Chun felt an invincible power pass through the firmament and into his body. Instantly, Yi Chun was sent flying. On the other hand, the steel supremacy only swayed a little, clearly having the upper hand. As expected of a demigod, as expected of the metal supremacy. Stopping his body, Yi Chun's eyes became much more solemn. They were both using the power of the supremacy, but his water supremacy seemed to be more than a level weaker than the metal supremacy in terms of offense, unable to completely isolate the power of the supremacy. When the golden spear and the water spear of the same size collided, it was obvious that the golden spear was stronger. The two were fundamentally different, and so were their strengths. The water supremacy was balanced in all aspects, but to a certain extent, it also represented mediocrity. "You're no match for me. I advise you to hand over all the chaos talismans." The steel supremacy raised his head, looking proud. "In terms of offensive power, you are indeed a level higher than me. However, a battle is not just about offensive power." Yi Chun sneered, and a blood-red sword silhouette shot out from his right eye. The steel paragon had no time to dodge at all. His soul shuddered, and he lost his connection to the outside world. The golden armor on his body dimmed, but it did not vanish. Clang! The blue flash of the sword tore through the golden armor and left a deep gash on the steel paragon's body. Silver-red blood splattered. It was Yi Chun who made the move. Not good. The steel paragon came to his senses and hurriedly retreated, quickly condensing a complete golden armor. Yi Chun did not give chase. The Sword of Hell, an attack on the soul and will, was his trump card. It had no effect on a beginner demigod, but it was still very effective against a heaven-defying sovereign. The reason why the Sword of Hell was so powerful was that it contained the will of hell. The only drawback was that it consumed a lot of energy and could not be used continuously. What he needed was to intimidate the Steel Sovereign. Amazing. It's a pity you can't use it continuously. The Steel Sovereign raised his head and said slowly. Yi Chun said calmly, "You only need to use it 3 times, and your soul will be injured. Once your soul is injured, you will not be able to fully activate the rule of metal, and the time it takes to activate the rule will be shortened." Activating the rule power required a lot of the soul. The martial primordial spirit contained the soul, and once the soul was injured, the martial primordial spirit would also be flawed. Of course, it was very difficult for a golden soul to be injured. For example, demigods would basically not use soul and will attacks, because soul and will attacks would not produce satisfactory results. Instead, it would waste their own soul power. Yi Chun's soul and will attack contained the will of hell, which was why it had a certain effect on the heaven-defying sovereign. "Looks like you're very confident." The Steel Sovereign was very unwilling. The stronger Yi Chun was, the more chaos runes Yi Chun had. If he could get his hands on Yi Chun's chaos runes, he could save at least 10,000 years of time. After all, the chaos battlefield did not only have chaos runes, but also some opportunities. Once he gathered all the chaos runes, he would be able to find his own opportunities without any worries. At our level, who doesn't have a little bit of confidence? To be honest, Yi Chun also wanted to snatch the Steel Sovereign's chaos runes. Unfortunately, he could not do anything to the Steel Sovereign. Even if the Sword of Hell could injure the Steel Sovereign's soul, Yi Chun could at most fight to a draw with the Steel Sovereign. If the battle continued, both of them would only suffer. The advantage brought by the quasi-demigod cultivation and the metal rule was too great, and it was not that easy to make up for. At the same time, Yi Chun could not help but wonder how strong he would be if his water rule were to be replaced with the metal rule. He would probably be able to defeat most beginner demigods. Even if he encountered the Chaos Flaming Bird King, he would still be able to put up a fight. Of course, it was not that the water rule was not good. In fact, even if Yi Chun could not defeat the Steel Sovereign, he could still use the water movement technique to escape. Very decisively, the Steel Sovereign turned around and flew away. If Yi Chun had not comprehended the water rule, he would have been willing to take the risk. The water rule had the water movement technique, which was extremely fast and had a strong recovery ability, second only to the wood rule. It was too risky to force it. The Steel Sovereign left. He couldn't do anything to the other party, so he naturally had to leave. I originally thought that the Steel Sovereign was one of the top existences among the heaven-defying sovereigns. It seems like I was looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. There are at least 800 heaven-defying sovereigns who came to the Primal Chaos battlefield, if not 1,000. There are bound to be some extremely abnormal ones, and there might even be heaven-defying sovereigns who are stronger than the Steel Sovereign. Yes, there are definitely more heaven-defying sovereigns than you said. Generally, 2 or 3 cosmoses can produce one heaven-defying sovereign. Some powerful cosmoses even have multiple heaven-defying sovereigns. I heard some seniors say that the Emperor Heaven Cosmos has the most heaven-defying sovereigns. Other than the Emperor Heaven Cosmos, there are other cosmoses that are not inferior to it. It is hard to say who is stronger and who is weaker. The surrounding universe life forms discussed amongst themselves. After staying in the 54 regions for over 20 years, Yi Chun left and headed to the next region. Time flowed by quietly like flowing water. Very soon, Yi Chun had already been in the Primal Chaos battlefield for 5,000 years. Out of the 99 regions, Yi Chun had gone to over 70 of them, and there were only around 20 left. During this period of time, Yi Chun had encountered many heaven-defying sovereigns and elementary demigods. He had even encountered mid-grade demigods. Not mentioning the mid-grade demigod, Yi Chun wasn't a match for them. He had relied on the water movement art to escape. There were strong and weak elementary demigods, and he had encountered the peak elementary demigod before. Heaven-defying sovereigns made Yi Chun sigh. None of the heaven-defying sovereigns that could survive were people that couldn't be trifled with. Yi Chun reckoned that there were many heaven-defying sovereigns that were stronger than him. Yi Chun had even encountered a heaven-defying sovereign that comprehended 2 great laws. His strength was unimaginably strong, and he was even harder to deal with than a mid-grade demigod. Chapter 1436. 18 Domains. Experts gathered here, and demigods were everywhere. 1,000 years ago, a miracle appeared here. It was said that it was a miracle created by a drop of true God's blood. True gods were unreachable existences to anyone. No matter how powerful a heaven-defying sovereign was, he was still a sovereign, not even a demigod. Demigods were just stronger bugs, unable to break free from their shackles, drifting with the flow, not knowing where their future lay. Only a true god could tear off all shackles and be unrestrained. The Supreme Chaotic Will could only suppress them, but could not force them to do things they did not like to do. The true God's blood contained the God's law and divine power. Yi Chun gradually understood that the God's law was formed by the fusion of different laws. Every true God's law was different, and divine power was even more precious. If one could absorb a bit of divine power, they might become a demigod, and a demigod might become a beginner demigod. On the boundless plain, there was a huge crater. Inside the crater, there were densely packed buildings. These buildings were different from ordinary buildings. They were made of crystal, and they looked like colorful lights. The huge buildings were hidden in the clouds, faintly discernible like phantoms. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Many figures flew into the clouds. There were heaven-defying sovereigns beginner demigods, and intermediate demigods. Entering the clouds, one could see that there was a world inside. The buildings were huge, as if they were the residences of gods, making people feel small. In a vast plaza, a heaven-defying supreme was engaged in a fierce battle with a mid-level demigod. Tiger Fong's sovereign, hand over the divine crystal now, or you will die without a burial place. The intermediate demigod with an extremely powerful aura shouted, Meng Kong Battle Saint, with just you? Tiger Fong, sovereign, sneered. The saber in his hand flashed, and a large amount of lightning bolts shot out. These lightning bolts seemed to have a mind of their own. No matter how Meng Kong Battle Saint tried to dodge, he could not escape from the lightning bolts. His body was charred black by the lightning bolts, and there were even burn marks on his body. Damn it! Xiong Kong Battle Saint glanced at Supreme Tiger Fong with fear. He had never fought against her before, but he had heard from others that she was extremely powerful and had comprehended the law of thunder. However, he did not expect her to be this powerful. Both of them were law powers, but the destructive power of the law of thunder was simply unheard of. Perhaps only a few laws could surpass the law of thunder. Supreme Tiger Fong, if you can receive this punch of mine, I'll spare your life. The injuries on his body healed in an instant. The ominous space battle Saint let out a loud roar and punched out at Honorable Tiger Fong. The majestic fist energy contained the will of a mid-level demigod, as expected of a mid-level half-deity. Supreme Tiger Fong didn't dare to be careless. Thunder and lightning surrounded his body, and in the next moment his entire body turned into a bolt of lightning, instantly escaping from the range of the fist energy. Coward! The ominous space battle Saint mumbled unwillingly, then turned around and left. There were too many heaven-defying supremes and demigods in the miraculous sight. Battles were happening all the time. Sometimes it was the heaven-defying supremes who were killed, and sometimes it was the low-level demigods who were killed. Of course, there were also many situations where neither side could defeat the other. The only thing that had never happened was that no mid-level demigod had fallen. Mid-level demigods were too powerful. Some of the terrifying, heaven-defying supremes might not be weaker than ordinary mid-level demigods in terms of attack power, but in terms of foundation, even 100 heaven-defying supremes couldn't compare to a mid-level demigod. You might be able to slightly injure a mid-level demigod, but to kill one would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. 100 years later, Yichen also arrived at the 18 domains. I didn't expect there to be a miraculous sight in the primal chaos battlefield. Yichen exclaimed in surprise, then flew into the clouds. When he reappeared, Yichen was in front of palace. The palace gate was tightly shut, and there were 2 stone lions in front of the gate. One of the stone lions suddenly enlarged and bit at Yichen. Swish! With his body turning transparent, Yichen dodged the stone lion's attack. At this moment, the other stone lion spread its wings and pounced at Yichen. It was even faster than the previous stone lion, as fast as lightning. Swish, swish, swish. After a fierce battle, Yichen shattered the stone lion's body, and the rubble scattered on the ground. Pushing open the palace gate, Yichen entered. In the palace, a crystal floated there, emitting a mesmerizing halo. Bathed in the halo, Yichen felt like his essence, chi, and spirit were like a baby, greedily breathing in. God-Force Crystal. Yichen reacted immediately. Without any hesitation, Yichen reached out and grabbed the God-Force Crystal. The next moment, the God-Force Crystal sank into Yichen's body, and at the same time, Yichen's body emitted a faint halo. Frowning slightly, Yichen didn't know whether obtaining the God-Force Crystal was a blessing or a curse. In a short time, he couldn't refine the God-Force Crystal, so naturally, he couldn't get rid of the halo, and if he couldn't get rid of the halo, he would easily become a fat meat in the eyes of others. As long as they killed him, they could seize the God-Force Crystal in his body. Forget it, I'll take it one step at a time. The God-Force Crystal could allow Yichen's cultivation to rise to the quasi-demigod level faster. It would be a pity to give it up. Basically, Every palace had a God-Force crystal. Of course, there were also some palaces that had been taken by others, and the stone lions in front of the gate were shattered on the ground. The miracle site could be entered from all directions. Gradually, Yi Chun went deep into the hinterland of the buildings, and he would often run into other heaven-defying supremes or beginner demigods. Most of the heaven-defying supremes restrained each other. Unless they were extremely confident in themselves, they generally wouldn't fight with heaven-defying supremes. After all, heaven-defying supremes used the power of law, which consumed a lot of energy. If they didn't have to use it, they wouldn't use it. Frequent fights would only make them weaker and weaker, and they would become fat meat in the eyes of others. As for beginner demigods, they didn't care so much. As long as they ran into a heaven-defying supremacy that they hadn't seen before, they would attack tentatively. If they couldn't win, they would fight, and if they couldn't, they would flee. After all, there were very few heaven-defying supremes that could kill beginner demigods quickly, even fewer than intermediate demigods. Looking at the 3 beginner demigods flying in front of him, Yi Chun raised his sword and charged over, courting death. Seeing that Yi Chun was so arrogant, the other party was instantly enraged, and one by one, they exploded with astonishing battle prowess. Boom, boom, boom. Airwaves surged as the 4 of them fought in a frenzy. Fighting 1 against 3, Yi Chun wasn't at a disadvantage at all, but he also couldn't suppress the other party. In fact, among the heaven-defying supremes, his strength was only above average. If he had the strength of Tiger Fong supremacy, he could easily kill the 3 beginner demigods. The God-Force crystal is melting faster. As the battle entered a white-hot stage, Yi Chun discovered that the God-Force crystal was melting faster and faster. The reason why he chose to fight head-on with the 3 beginner demigods was that he wanted to use the battle to refine the God-Force crystal. Using the power of law was a huge burden on heaven-defying supremes, and the God-Force crystal could completely make up for it. Chapter 1437. Battle Sage Song-hee, Battle Sage Utian, Battle Sage Dong-yun. I'm here to help you. Right at this moment, another primary demigod charged over from the distance. This primary demigod had ant-like antennae on his head, and his eyes were compound. His teeth were incomparably sharp, carrying an evil aura. Both of his hands were crisscrossing, and one sharp disc after another shot toward Yi Chun. Black Ant Battle Sage. The 3 of them turned around and revealed looks of joy. Black Ant Battle Sage was a peak elementary demigod. Apart from some terrifying sovereign paragons, there were very few sovereign paragons who were his match. His disc could even restrain some extremely fast sovereign paragons. Another one? Yi Chun frowned slightly and swept the firmament sword to deflect the incoming discs. After the discs were deflected, they danced around Yi Chun, and it was difficult to get rid of them. Fighting 1 against 4, Yi Chun gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. The main reason was that Black Ant Battle Saint's disc was too annoying, distracting him quite a bit. Meteor Frisbee. All of a sudden, more discs appeared around Black Ant Battle Saint. These discs were like a meteor shower, crazily shooting toward Yi Chun. Due to their extreme speed, they even created friction with the space-time of the chaos battlefield, bursting forth with dazzling radiance. Amazing! Just by sensing it, Yi Chun knew that he couldn't block Black Ant Battle Sage's killing move, and he couldn't escape the attack's range with his water travel art. The firmament sword swept out, and sword light swept out like waves. The meteor frisbee entered the waves, and its speed decreased sharply. In the end, only 7 or 8 discs hit Yi Chun, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Relying on the Xian Wu Saint armor and the Immortal sword body, Yi Chun wasn't seriously injured, and he only spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Sky Saint artifact armor. Black Ant Battle Sage's eyes lit up. He, a peak elementary demigod, didn't have a Sky Saint artifact armor, but his opponent did. I only want the Sky Saint artifact armor. You can have the God Crystal, Black Ant Battle Sage said. I don't think that's appropriate. Although the Divine Power Crystal is precious, it's more than 10 times less valuable than a Heavenly Sage artifact. Battle Sage Song, he expressed a different opinion. That's right, Black Ant Battle Sage. You have to show your sincerity. Battle Sage Hado also said. Black Ant Battle Saint clenched his teeth. I will compensate you with 2 divinity crystals. How about it? If a demigod wanted to improve, it would take a long time, but divine power crystals could save a lot of time. 6 divine power crystals could save at least tens of thousands of years of bitter cultivation, which made Black Ant Battle Sage's heart ache. Deal. The 3 of them knew that they couldn't push their luck. Dang, dang, dang. Attracted by the Xian Wu sacred armor, Black Ant Battle Sage put in even more effort. After all, he was a peak elementary demigod. Once he used his ultimate and killer moves, Yi Chen would have a hard time blocking them. If not for Yi Chen's immortal sword body, he wouldn't have been able to resist for so long with just the Xian Wu sacred armor. After all, there were strong and weak elementary demigods. A truly powerful elementary demigod like Black Ant Battle Sage was many times stronger than an ordinary elementary demigod. Hand over the sky, Saint Artifact Armor, and the Divine Power Crystal. If we're in a good mood, we might let you go. Don't be so stubborn. Battle Sage Dong Yun planned to break Yi Chen's will to fight. After all, Yi Chen wasn't weak. Even if the 4 of them worked together, it would take a long time to defeat him. It was better to deal with him as soon as possible. If you have the ability, then defeat me for real. Don't waste your breath. Yi Chen wasn't stupid. Handing over the Xian Wu sacred armor was tantamount to seeking death. His immortal sword body could only resist the attacks of a quasi-demigod. You're courting death. The 4 of them were furious and attacked with all their might. Soon, a day had passed. Yi Chen's aura had dimmed significantly. In his body, the divine power crystal's replenishment rate couldn't keep up with its consumption rate. In another 3 or 4 days, he would die of exhaustion. 2 days later, Yi Chen's aura weakened again. He can't hold on much longer. Battle Sage Utian said while attacking. Now that he voluntarily handed over the sky's Saint Artifact Armor and the Divine Power Crystal, we can't let him go. He wasted so much of our time. Battle Sage Dong Yun said hatefully. The halo around Yi Chen's body was very strong. There were at least 6 or 7 divine power crystals. In addition to the 6 divine power crystals promised by Battle Sage Black Ant, each of them could get about 4. This was a great harvest. The only depressing thing was that Yi Chen was too tanky with the Sky Saint Artifact Armor. What the 4 of them didn't know was that the 3 level 9 sword souls in Yi Chen's Sea of Soul were being nourished by the Divine Power Crystal and were undergoing a transformation. It should be known that divine power was the amalgamation of all kinds of energy, and sword intent was one of them. If it was just a single sword intent, it definitely wouldn't be able to transform so quickly. However, Yi Chen had 3 supreme level 9 sword intents, and they resonated with each other. Now that they were being nourished by the divine power crystal, they were quietly transforming. Go to hell. Battle Sage Black Ant used the shooting star frisbee again. Countless meteors shot toward Yi Chen. Sorry, it's my turn this time. 3 powerful sword intents suddenly radiated from Yi Chen's body. Among these 3 sword intents, one was deep and violent, exuding the aura of annihilation. One was pure and flawless, exuding the true essence of immortality. The last one was radiant. No filth could hide in front of it. It was the same billowing wave soar, but this time it was like a heavenly river, vast and majestic. The shooting star frisbee collided with the river water, and its speed was drastically reduced. As the river water slammed into it again and again, the shooting star frisbee was forced back, causing Battle Sage Black Ant and the other 3 to be battered and exhausted. One of Battle Sage Dong Yun's arms was even sliced off. Supreme Mid-9th, Level 9 Sword Intense, 3. Battle Sage Song, his eyes almost popped out. There were many people who possessed Supreme Martial Intense. Among heaven-defying paragons, 9 out of 10 would have Supreme Martial Intense. However, he had never heard of anyone who possessed 3. Even if Qin Wentian was a reincarnated true divinity, it was still too ridiculous. Damn it. Battle Sage Black Ant was extremely unwilling to accept this. He switched to another killing move and attacked Yi-Chun. Unfortunately, the 3 Supreme Sword Intents had been upgraded from the early 9th level to the mid-9th level, causing Yi-Chun's strength to rise by leaps and bounds. Let alone Battle Sage Black Ant, who was a peak elementary demigod. Even a peak elementary demigod might not be able to do anything to Yi-Chun. One must know that the Destruction Sword Intent allowed Yi-Chun's attack power to rise, and the Immortal Sword Intent allowed Yi-Chun's Immortal Sword Body to rise by another level. With his strength rising by leaps and bounds, Yi-Chun instantly gained the upper hand. Previously, he was unable to block Battle Sage Black Ant's killing move even with his full strength. But now, he could effortlessly crush it. Swish! A blood-red sword shadow shot out from Yi-Chun's right eye, sinking into Battle Sage Dong Yun's soul sea. Battle Sage Dong Yun let out a miserable scream as blood flowed out of his 7 apertures. After the Destruction Sword Intent was upgraded to the mid-9th level, the might of the Sword of Hell had increased by leaps and bounds. It could already injure the soul of an elementary demigod. After transforming into a waterman, Yi-Chun wielded the Firmament Sword and slashed through Battle Sage Dong Yun's body. Pooh! Battle Sage Dong Yun's body split apart as his martial Dao Yuan Shun was directly destroyed. The combination of the Destruction Sword Intent and the Sky Saint weapon, the Firmament Sword, was extremely tyrannical. Chapter 1438. Let's go! Black Ant Battle Sage made a prompt decision and left. He was neither a mid-level demigod nor Yi-Chun. Right now, he was no match for Yi-Chun. If he was hit by the Sky Saint weapon, even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. This was why he wanted the Sky Saint armor. With it, even a mid-level demigod wouldn't be able to hurt him in a short time. Let's go! Seeing Black Ant Battle Sage leave, Battle Sage Hada and Battle Sage Song, he fled in a hurry. Before, the 4 of them weren't a match for Yi-Chun. Now, only the 2 of them were left. There are fewer and fewer shortcomings. Exhaling, Yi-Chun didn't chase after them. As the 3 Supreme Sword Intents broke through to mid-9th step, Yi-Chun knew that the gap between him and those truly frightening, heaven-defying sovereigns was getting smaller and smaller. Half of his current strength was due to the Sky Saint artifact, Firmament Sword. Without it, and before his sword intent broke through, he would at most be a mid-level heaven-defying sovereign. As for the truly frightening heaven-defying sovereigns, their cultivation base was at least at the quasi-demigod level. This was something Yi-Chun couldn't hope to reach. However, with the God Power Crystal, he felt that he wasn't far from breaking through. After collecting the God Force crystals that escaped from Battle Sage Wintercloud's body, Yi-Chun now had 10 God Force crystals in his body. Up until now, he had only used up 1% of one God Force crystal. There were countless palaces in the Divine Ruin. The bigger the palace, the more God Force crystals there were. But at the same time, the lion statues outside were stronger. As for how many God Force crystals there were in the Divine Ruin, Yi-Chun couldn't guess. The Divine Ruin was simply too big. From the outside, it looked like it was only 1% of the size of the 18 domains. In fact, the Divine Ruin had its own space inside, which was bigger than the 18 domains. After dozens of years, the number of God Power crystals in his body had reached 40. His whole body was like a small sun. Wherever he went, a halo of light would shine. In the past few decades, Yi-Chun had already refined 10 Divine Force crystals, and his martial Yuan soul was faintly glowing with a faint golden light. With one more step, his silver Yuan soul would transform into a gold Yuan soul. This was a palace that was over 1,000 meters tall. The 2 stone lions outside the palace looked extraordinary, like the mounts of gods. When Yi-Chun approached, the stone lion on the right let out a loud roar, and its huge body suddenly became alive. The sound of blood flowing was like a monstrous wave, emitting a domineering aura that looked down on the world. Immediately after, the stone lion on the left resurrected. The 2 stone lions that had come to life attacked Yi-Chun from the left and right. So powerful, Yi-Chun felt an extreme pressure. The strength of these two stone lions was almost the same as his. Their bodies were impervious to swords and spears, and it was impossible to break them. After fighting for several days and nights, Yichen finally destroyed the bodies of the two stone lions. At this moment, he was close to his limit. Fortunately, he had the divine power crystal to quickly nourish him. Creak! Pushing open the palace gate, Yichen walked in. 1 divine power crystal, 2 divine power crystals, 5 divine power crystals floated in the palace. And in addition, surrounded by the divine power crystals, there was a whirlwind full of spirituality. Wind Law Fragment. Generally, law fragments would not appear in the void. They would only appear in the Saint Artifact's source, or in the soul sea of supremes and demigods. Under normal circumstances, law fragments would automatically dissipate once they left the Saint Artifact or the soul sea. There was no way to preserve them for a long time. The appearance of a wind law fragment here was really beyond Yichen's expectations. Putting away the divine power crystal, Yichen sized up the wind law fragment. He did not know how to use the wind law fragment. Reaching out his hand, Yichen tried to touch the wind law fragment. Chi, 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 chi. As soon as the seemingly gentle wind law fragment touched Yichen's finger, it instantly went berserk. The violent whirlwind cut Yichen's finger, and the power was no less than a heaven-defying supremacy's all-out attack. Frowning, Yichen quickly withdrew his hand. With his strength, he did not need to be afraid of the wind law fragment, but he did not want to exhaust the power of the wind law fragment. Without a source of power, its power would be depleted every time it exerted its power. This was different from the water law fragment in Yichen's soul sea or the law fragment in the Heavenly Saint Artifact source. That's right, the Heavenly Saint Artifact. Yichen's eyes lit up, and he pulled out the firmament sword. The firmament sword contained the law of water, the law of wind, and the law of space. Yichen hoped to use the law of wind to attract the wind law fragment. The tip of the firmament sword slowly came into contact with the wind law fragment. To Yichen's surprise, the wind law fragment did not resist too much, as if it was treating the firmament sword as a stranger. Yichen did not dare to be too hasty, so he gave the firmament sword and the wind law fragment enough time to cultivate feelings. Gradually, Yichen could feel that the wind law fragment no longer resisted the firmament sword, and it truly treated the firmament sword as a partner. After a slight hesitation, Yichen inserted the firmament sword deep into the core of the wind law fragment, and then activated the firmament sword with all his might, activating the power of the wind law. The wind law fragment subconsciously resisted for a while, and then it was thrown into the firmament sword, disappearing without a trace. Success! Yichen could not believe it, and he quickly probed the firmament sword source with his soul force. In the firmament sword source, there was a water droplet, 2 whirlwinds, and a transparent crystal. The wind law fragment has become 2. Yichen let out a breath. He had succeeded. Although he had not comprehended the wind law fragment and could not fully utilize the power of the wind law fragment, the firmament sword itself could absorb the power of the wind law fragment to provide Yichen with combat power. It was just that it could not be used directly. Swish! Holding the firmament sword in his hand, Yichen swung it. The sword was unbelievably fast, illusory, and difficult to capture with one's consciousness. The speed and power of the sword have increased a lot. This should be the effect of the wind law. The firmament sword, which was not very light, was as light as a feather in Yichen's hand. As he swung the firmament sword, it would provide a powerful force. Time passed quickly, and soon another few decades had passed. This time, Yichen arrived in front of a 1,200-meter-tall palace. Originally, with Yichen's strength, he was not the opponent of these 2 stone lions. However, after the firmament sword had fused with a wind rule fragment, his strength had once again increased to a whole new level. Now, he was barely able to fight on par with the 2 stone lions. After a week, Yichen had shattered the bodies of the 2 stone lions. Pushing open the palace door, Yichen held his breath. There were 6 divine force crystals and a water droplet floating in the palace. The Wind Law Fragment. Apart from the Firmament Sword and the Black Tortoise Sacred Armor, Yi Chen's Soul Sea also contained the Wind Law Fragment. In other words, Yi Chen could completely absorb the Wind Law Fragment and directly increase his combat power. In the primal chaos battlefield, danger and opportunity coexisted. It depended on whether one had the strength to seize the opportunity. Chapter 1439. Putting away the 6 divine force crystals, the halo around Yi Chen's body became even more brilliant. However, at this moment, his attention was completely focused on the water law fragment. Any law was broad and profound. To fully comprehend it, it would take an endless amount of time. The law comprehended by a heaven-defying supreme was at most 1% of a complete law, or even less. The water law fragment in front of him was about the same size as the one in Yi Chen's Soul Sea. If he could successfully absorb it, the power of the law of water would double. In this way, even if he encountered someone who had comprehended a powerful law, Yi Chen would have the power to fight. The law of water filled the air. Yi Chen's palm was wrapped in a layer of water as he slowly approached the water droplet in the void. Buzz! The water droplet rippled as if it was testing. When it sensed that Yi Chen had something that attracted it, the ripples also covered Yi Chen. The entire interior of the palace seemed to have become a world of water, separated from the outside world. Soaking in the water, Yi Chen completely released his power of the law of water, intertwining with the power of the law of water released by the water droplet. Gradually, the water droplet moved towards the space between Yi Chen's eyebrows. After an unknown amount of time, the water droplet stuck to the space between Yi Chen's eyebrows, and half of it had already entered his flesh. If one could see through it, they would find that there was a water thread connecting the water droplet in Yi Chen's Soul Sea and the water droplet between his eyebrows. The water thread gradually tightened, and the distance between the 2 water droplets was getting closer and closer. When the 2 water droplets came into contact with each other, an earth-shattering sound came from the palace. The violent water current tumbled and shook, and Yi Chen, who was in the water current, was surrounded by an absolutely calm zone. The water current tumbled more and more violently, and the palace shook. After a long time, everything came to an abrupt stop. In the palace, Yi Chen forcefully exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. With a flip of his wrist, a huge water ball formed. Whether it was the speed of formation or the quality, it was far better than before. The power of any law is broad and profound. Although the law of water is inferior to the other laws in terms of offense, its effects are not inferior at all. Yi Chen suddenly turned into a waterman. Without a sound, the waterman scuttled around the palace. His speed was twice as fast as before. I wonder what level my strength is at now. Seriously speaking, the heaven-defying supremes were divided into 2 major levels. The first level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against beginner demigods, while the second level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against mid-level demigods. There is a huge difference in strength between the same level. For example, some could only fight against the most ordinary beginner demigods, while some could kill beginner demigods. This was the difference between the first and second level. No matter how powerful a beginner demigod was, he would have to flee in panic if he encountered a mid-level demigod. However, the second level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against mid-level demigods. Yi Chen did not know if he had reached the second level because he had no reference. Before this, Yi Chen estimated that he should be at the peak of the first level. He was not sure if he had reached the peak of the first level, but the difference should not be too big. The closer he got to the core of the miracle, the more heaven-defying supremes and demigods there were. Yi Chen was not a saint. He took the initiative to attack a few times and kill the heaven-defying supremes and 2 beginner demigods. The number of divine power crystals in his body had reached 90. The vast and dazzling halo could be seen and felt from far away. It was like the moon in the night sky, with nowhere to hide. However, Yi Chen was not the only one who was eye-catching. There were many who were as eye-catching as he was, and some were even more eye-catching than him. The number of divine power crystals in his body was estimated to be hundreds. Rumble, none of them were easy to deal with. They all looked for prey to kill. The strong looked for the weak, and the weak looked for the weaker ones. Of course, there were many fights between the strong. Yichen was a little speechless. He thought he was already very strong, but he was still targeted by a heaven-defying supremes. I am Supremacy Silver Radiance. It is your honor to die by my hands. This heaven-defying supremacy was tall and perfect. His whole body was silver, as if it was made of silver. Without a doubt, he was the heaven-defying supremacy of Emperor Sky Cosmos. Emperor Sky Cosmos was one of the top existences in countless cosmos, slightly better than Ancient Cosmos and Sky Tyrant Cosmos. I am Honorable Swordsman Green Lotus. Please enlighten me. Since he could not avoid it, Yichen had to prove to his opponent that he was not a pushover. Die! A golden armor appeared on Supremacy Silver Radiance's body, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. What made Yichen squint was that the golden spear in his opponent's hand was not an ordinary golden spear. The body and the tip of the spear were covered in flames. Metal rule and fire rule. Dual rule supremes. No wonder he is so arrogant and confident. Yichen frowned. Last time, he had seen a supremacy who had comprehended two rules. However, he had run far away and did not have the chance to face him. Puff! With the flaming gold spear in his hand, Supremacy Silver Radiance thrust forward. The explosive speed was as fast as a spark. The sharpness of the metal rule and the explosiveness of the fire rule were perfectly combined, releasing an even more shocking lethality. The firmament sword was drawn in an instant, and Yichen met it with his sword. In terms of attack, the water rule was not as good as the metal rule and the fire rule. However, after absorbing a fragment of the water rule, Yichen's level of the water rule was very high, and he could use softness to overcome hardness. Supremacy Silver Radiance felt his flaming gold spear was like it was stuck in a swamp. It was soft and powerless, with less than 10% of its power left. He was shocked and thought, what a powerful water rule. Looks like you must have absorbed a fragment of the water rule. Otherwise, the water rule could not be so powerful. Supremacy Silver Radiance took back his flaming gold spear and said, "Not bad." Yichen nodded. "You're lucky. If I had your luck, you would have been dead by now." Supremacy Silver Radiance was very envious. He had been in the Divine Ruin for so many years, but he had only gotten one fragment of the Earth Rule, which was useless to him. If he had gotten a fragment of the Metal Rule or a fragment of the Fire Rule, his power would have increased a lot. Among the sky-defying Supremes in Level 2, he would hardly have a rival. Instead of looking for trouble with Yichen, Supremacy Silver Radiance turned around to look for other sky-defying Supremes or demigods. My power should be at Level 2 now, but it's not stable yet. Yichen knew that the reason why Supremacy Silver Radiance left was not because he could not defeat Yichen, but because he felt that the reward was not worth the effort. They were both sky-defying Supremes in Level 2. Supremacy Silver Radiance could defeat Yichen, but it was not possible for him to kill Yichen. The water movement skill of the Water Rule was not something to be trifled with. The center of the Divine Ruin was a huge round building. The building had one floor above ground and many floors below. Surging waves of God power spread out from the bottom of the building. It was the waves of God blood. Chapter 1440. Above ground level, huge yellow figures patrol the area. Once they discovered an intruder, they would attack as a group. These yellow figures were extremely powerful, and their defense was also extremely high. Normally, it would take a very long time for a first-stage, heaven-defying Supreme Master and an ordinary elementary demigod to kill one of them. The Earth Law Guards were completely formed by the power of the Earth Law. Unlike the Earth Law fragments, the Earth Law Guards couldn't absorb them. Whoosh! As Yichen moved forward, Firmament Sword was like a formless stream. The Earth Law Guards would disintegrate at the slightest touch. His Water Law realm had doubled. Yichen's Water Law sword art had already surpassed its original realm. All of you scram. In the distance, a dazzling light suddenly rushed over. Along the way, a large number of Earth Law Guards were vaporized. Some heaven-defying supremacy and demigod who couldn't dodge in time were even more miserable. They didn't even have the time to scream before they exploded with light. Their divine power crystals sucked away. Coincidentally, Yichen was right in the path of the dazzling light. Not good. Yichen quickly turned into a waterman and flew away. Puff! 1/5 of the waterman was vaporized, and the rest flew far away before stopping. Hey, interesting. Forget it. I'll spare your life. The dazzling light didn't slow down and continued forward. When it reached the stairs leading to the first underground level, a yellow figure that was 10 times taller than the ordinary Earth Law Guard stopped it. Of course, it only stopped it for a moment. However, this moment allowed Yi Chun to clearly see the other's appearance. It was a heaven-defying supremacy from the crystal universe. Its whole body was made of transparent crystals, and the divine power halo it emitted was 10 times brighter than Yi Chen's. Roughly speaking, it probably had more than 1,000 divine power crystals in its body. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so dazzling. However, the dazzling light didn't come from the divine power crystals, but the light law power, which was one of the top laws. In less than half a breath's time, the Earth Law Guard leader melted and turned into a beam of light, disappearing from the stairs. It's the Crystal Universe's Light Law Guard leader. He's even stronger than the rumors say. As expected of one of the 5 great supremacies of the primal chaos battlefield, each of them is heaven-defying. Compared to them, we can't be called heaven-defying supremacies. Everyone discussed animatedly, their tones filled with respect. Exalted Light, one of the 5 great paragons? Hearing everyone's discussion, Yi Chun was very surprised. This Light Supreme Being was the strongest heaven-defying Supreme Being that Yi Chun had ever seen. Compared to him, Silver Radiant Supreme Being was much weaker. He had never thought that there were 4 heaven-defying Supreme Beings at this level. They were called the 5 Great Supreme Beings. That was close. Luckily, he didn't target me. Losing 1/5 of his body was not a big deal to Yi Chun. It was just that he had used up some of his sword energy. The profoundness of the water traversing technique was not something that ordinary people could understand. Of course, the main thing was that his opponent was not targeting him. The Law of Light was much faster than the water traversing technique in terms of speed. Otherwise, it would not be one of the top laws. After the leader of the Law of Earth Guards was obliterated by the Sovereign of Light, it condensed again not long after, and continued to block the staircase entrance. Soon, Yi Chun arrived at the top of the stairs and engaged in an intense battle with the Law of Earthguard leader. After spending 5 breaths of time, Yi Chun successfully passed through and arrived at the first underground floor. He did not see the Light Supreme Being on the first underground floor. Obviously, the Light Supreme Being had already passed through this floor. With his strength, he could have done it in a short time. The first floor above ground was for the Law of Earth Guards, and the second floor below ground was for the Law of Fire Guards. The Law of Fire Guards were all made of fire, and their explosive power was extremely strong. Fortunately, Yi Chen's Law of Water just happened to restrain the Law of Fire, so it was easier to deal with the Law of Fire Guards than the Law of Earth Guards. The second underground floor was guarded by the Law of Water Guards. The Law of Water Guards were very hard to deal with. Sometimes they would turn into a pool of water to ambush. Sometimes they would turn into a whirlpool to entangle the intruder. And sometimes they would break apart and condense into water arrows to shoot. Open! A flash of lightning flickered and quickly surpassed everyone like a lightning blade. It's the Tiger Fong Supreme Being. Amazing. Probably only the 5 great Supreme Beings are stronger than him. Tiger Fong Supreme Being comprehended the Law of Thunder. Although the Law of Thunder isn't one of the top laws, it is undoubtedly a powerful law, much stronger than the fundamental laws. There are also many heaven-defying sovereigns and demigods on this floor, and everyone started discussing. The majority of heaven-defying sovereigns had similar foundations. For example, they were all demigods, mid-stage 9th Order Martial Will, and Heart Force Perfection Realm. In comparison, Yi Chen's foundation was slightly weaker, and he had not reached the demigod realm yet. However, he had the Firmament Sword and the Black Tortoise Saint Armor, especially the firmament sword. After absorbing a law of wind fragment, the sword's power increased greatly, and it made up for the lack of cultivation. Other than Sky Saint artifacts, the true embodiment of a heaven-defying sovereign strength was the power of the laws. There were strong and weak laws, and from high to low, they were classified as peak laws, powerful laws, and fundamental laws. Those who could comprehend peak laws were monsters among monsters, and there was nothing they couldn't do. As for those who could comprehend powerful laws, they were elites among monsters. Seriously speaking, Yichen might be a monster among monsters. Up until now, he had only cultivated for tens of thousands of years, while many heaven-defying sovereigns had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. Half a day passed, and Yichen arrived at the third underground floor. The ones guarding the third underground floor were the Law of Wood Protectors. The Law of Wood Protectors were all rooted in the ground, and the branches on their bodies were extremely soft, like whips. When countless whips came, even Yichen would be exhausted. Other than that, the Law of Wood Protectors were extremely hard to kill. As long as the roots weren't completely destroyed, they would immediately recover. After spending a full 3 days, Yichen finally made it through. If the Law of Water Protectors were said to be hard to deal with, and the Law of Wood Protectors were said to be hard to kill, then the Law of Metal Protectors on the fourth underground floor were very ferocious, and their power was very concentrated. Fortunately, the heaven-defying sovereigns here all had divine power crystals in their bodies, which could quickly replenish their energy and allow them to fight for a long time. A week later, Yichen arrived at the fifth underground floor. This floor was much more difficult in comparison, because the ones guarding this place were the Law of Wind Protectors. The Law of Wind was one of the powerful laws, and it wasn't something that the fundamental laws could compare to. The Law of Wind Protectors moved very quickly, almost on par with Yichen. Their attacks were very sharp, comparable to the Law of Metal, and the difficulty of dealing with them was close to that of the Law of Water. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to train himself, Yichen would have already left. The fifth underground floor was guarded by the Law of Wind Protectors, but who knew what kind of freakish protectors would be on the sixth underground floor, or even the seventh underground floor. He wasn't the Tiger Fang Sovereign, nor was he the Light Sovereign. Even if there were any treasures down there, he wouldn't be able to snatch them. His only motivation was to increase his cultivation. The other heaven-defying sovereigns were all demigods, and it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to become an elementary demigod. At the very least, it would be very difficult to do so in a short period of time. But he wasn't a demigod yet, so he could completely rely on divine power crystals to break through in a short period of time. As long as he continued to fight, he would be able to accelerate his breakthrough. Chapter 1441. After spending 3 months, Yichen passed through the fifth underground floor protected by the Law of Wind Guards. After spending a year, Yichen passed through the sixth underground floor protected by the Law of Poison Guards. After spending 5 years, Yichen passed through the seventh underground floor protected by the Law of Bones Guards. After reaching the eighth underground floor, Yichen was finally stuck. Although there were fewer law guards the further down he went, and it was usually a one-on-one battle, the law guards on the eighth underground floor were Law of Shadows guards. Even in a one-on-one battle, Yichen would find it difficult to defeat them. The Law of Shadows guards were shadows. This shadow could be illusory, and no attack would be able to hit it. It could also be solid and release sharp attacks. In order to defeat the Law of Shadows guards, one had to attack when the opponent was in a solid state. Otherwise, even if the attack was 10 times stronger, it would be useless. Facing the elusive Law of Shadows guards, Yichen did not dare to be careless. He was in his most cautious state at all times. The extreme pressure turned into extreme motivation. Coupled with the numerous God Force crystals in his body, Yichen's cultivation finally broke through to the quasi-demigod level. His martial Yuan Shun became a quasi-gold Yuan Shun with a faint golden color. The moment he broke through, Yichen could clearly feel that his senses and reaction speed had greatly increased. The originally indistinct Law of Shadows guards were no longer as elusive as before. It was as if he could grasp their every move. Chi! A sword flower lit up in the void. Yi Chen's sword pierced through the throat of a Law of Shadows guard. How profound! As expected of a quasi-gold yuan shun. Yi Chen's eyes lit up. At this moment, not only had his battle prowess greatly increased, but his senses and reaction speed had also reached a limit. It was as if he had the ability to predict. The moment his opponent turned solid, he stabbed his sword at his opponent's vitals, killing him in one hit. If it was before, he would not have been able to find or grasp this opportunity. Chi! 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 After becoming a quasi-demigod, the Law of Shadows guards were no longer a match for Yi Chen. Soon, Yi Chen passed through the 8th underground floor. Then, the 9th floor, the 10th floor, the 11th floor, the 12th floor. Yi Chen was like a hot knife through butter, rushing to the 13th underground floor in one breath. The ones guarding the 13th underground floor were the Darkness Elemental Guards. The Darkness Elemental Guards were one of the top elemental guards, not something that powerful elemental guards could compare to. At this moment, there were more than 10 cosmic life forms trapped on this floor. There were heaven-defying sovereigns and mid-level demigods. These cosmic life forms were much stronger than the previous Yi Chen. Yi Chen guessed that these people must have arrived a long time ago, because he had never seen any of them before. The 13th underground floor was different from the previous floors. There were many stairways here, and in front of each stairway was a Law of Darkness guard. If one wanted to enter the next floor, they only needed to kill one of the Law of Darkness guards. Of course, although one only needed to kill one Law of Darkness guard, the difficulty was definitely 100 or even 1,000 times higher than the 12th underground floor. Without sufficient strength, one might be trapped here forever like these people. Not in a hurry, Yi Chen observed the battle between the Law of Darkness guard and these cosmic life forms for a while. Yi Chen discovered that the Law of Darkness guard had two extremely terrifying abilities. One was to transform into darkness, rendering attacks ineffective just like the Law of Shadows guard. The other was to contain a suction force. Moves and techniques are already useless. Only absolute strength is the most reliable. Yi Chen frowned. The Law of Darkness guard was too powerful. If he wanted to defeat it, his attack had to reach a certain level, just like Light Supremacy or Thunder Tusk Supremacy. Billowing Sword. Yi Chen used a killing move right off the bat. A surging wave of sword light blasted toward the Law of Darkness guard. Hua! The Law of Darkness guard instantly transformed into darkness. The surging wave of sword light entered the darkness and disappeared without a sound. The next moment, darkness condensed, and the Law of Darkness guard grabbed at Yi Chen. Its palm contained an extremely powerful suction force, as if the universe was about to be destroyed and enter the Great Dark Age. I don't believe you can withstand many billowing sword attacks. Yi Chen used the billowing sword again and again. The Law of Wind in the Firmament sword increased his sword speed, and his attack frequency more than doubled. 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. Gradually, Yi Chen discovered that the Law of Darkness guard strength was weakening. 5 years had passed, and the Law of Darkness guard finally shattered, unable to condense again. He turned his head to look at the others. A few cosmic life forms had disappeared, and a few new faces had appeared. They were probably the same as him and had made it through. Of course, they might have died in the hands of the Law of Darkness guard. 14th underground floor. The Law of Light guard. The Law of Light guard strength was much higher than the Law of Darkness guards. Not only could it transform into light, but its movement and attack speed were also quite fast. It was a great threat. Here, Yi Chen saw Supremacy, Thunder Tusk. In addition, he also saw 7 other cosmic life forms, 3 heaven-defying supremes, and 4 mid-level demigods. Supremacy Thunder Tusk was indeed in existence second only to the 5 supremes. His attack power was very terrifying. Yi Chen estimated that he might not be afraid of Supremacy Thunder Tusk, but he was definitely not a match for Supremacy Thunder Tusk. After all, there was a natural gap. Thunder Tusk comprehended the Law of Thunder, while Yi Chen comprehended the Law of Water. Apart from Supremacy Thunder Tusk, the other 3 heaven-defying supremes could not be underestimated. They all comprehended powerful laws, namely the law of wind, the law of ice, and the law of blood. As for the 4 mid-level demigods, they were even more terrifying. Their foundations were too deep, and they were not afraid of the law of light guard's attack at all. Ichan did not see Supremacy Thundertusk, and he guessed that he must have made it through this floor. After all, the strength of the 5 Supremes was publicly acknowledged. Only by facing the top laws would one know how powerful they were. Haha, everyone, I'll make a move first. Supremacy Thundertusk slashed open the law of light guard's body, stepped into the stairway, and disappeared. Damn it, the next floor will definitely have god blood and law fragments. Die. The remaining cosmic life forms were all anxious, especially the 4 mid-level demigods. Being able to reach this step, they were all experts among the mid-level demigods. The 5 Supremes might be stronger than them, but it would be extremely difficult to kill them. If they could get their hands on the god blood, their strength would undergo a qualitative change. They might even become powerful demigods in an instant and comprehend laws. The martial primordial spirit of a mid-level demigod was a gold primordial spirit, and it had reached the mid-level gold stage. Once it went berserk, there would be turbulent energy waves everywhere. Finally, a mid-level demigod passed this floor and also entered the stairway. I can only take it one step at a time. Ichan chuckled bitterly. He had made multiple breakthroughs, and his power had improved by leaps and bounds. But there would always be someone more powerful than him. It would not be easy to get a share from so many powerful warriors. Of course, it was also impossible for Ichan to back off. After all, he had already come this far. Fortunately, his cultivation had reached the quasi-demigod level, and he had some ability to protect himself when facing a terrifying existence like Supremacy Thundertusk. Chapter 1442. It took Ichan 10 years to defeat the Law of Light Protector. At this moment, the number of people on the 14th underground floor had increased to 10. There were 5 heaven-defying Supremes and 5 mid-level demigods. Whoosh! With a flash, Ichan entered the stairway and headed to the next floor. 15 floors underground. A ball of blood floated in the air, slowly spinning and wriggling, emitting a supreme aura. Before this aura, Ichan felt as if his breathing had stopped. From the outside to the inside, from his body to his soul, there wasn't a single part of him that wasn't suppressed. The entire 15th floor seemed to have turned into a world of mercury, incomparably heavy. Divine blood. Ichan's eyes flashed. The blood of a true god was extremely precious, and there were only 2 ways to obtain it. First, the true god would voluntarily or be forced to separate the god's blood. Second, when a true god died, the god's blood would scatter everywhere. If one could refine a drop of god's blood, the effect would definitely be greater than 100,000 or even 1 million divine power crystals. If the god's blood made Ichan extremely excited, then the nomological fragments around the god's blood also made Ichan extremely tempted. There were 15 law fragments around the god's blood. They were metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, poison, white bone, shadow, darkness, and light. The law of metal fragment was a metal ball the size of a longan. It emitted a faint golden light. The golden light was not dazzling, but it gave off an extremely sharp feeling. It was as if being illuminated by the golden light would immediately blind one's eyes. The fragment of the law of wood was a thumb-sized seed. The seed was emerald green and brimmed with endless vitality. The space around the seed was affected by this vitality. Hundreds of flowers bloomed and vegetation grew. The law of water fragment was the size of a fist, and it was a ball of water. Looking at the ball of water, Ichan felt as if he had arrived at a boundless sea of chaos. The waves surged violently, and the waves covered the sky, causing one to feel insignificant. The law of fire fragment was a cluster of flames. The fragment of the law of earth was an irregular piece of yellow soil, thick and boundless. The wind law fragment was a powerful hurricane, more than 10 times larger than the one absorbed by the firmament sword. The law of poison fragment was a drop of purplish-black poison. The white bone law fragment was a piece of white bone that seemed to have grown out of the void. The fragment of the law of shadow was faintly discernible. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see it. The law of thunder fragment was a lightning mark. From time to time, it would release lightning and thunder, rumbling and flashing. The law of darkness fragment was pure darkness, a darkness that devoured everything. The light law fragment was a dazzling light that repelled all impurities. It wasn't as deep as the darkness, but it was more tyrannical and pure. At the moment, 5 people had arrived on the 15th underground floor. They were 3 heaven-defying supremes and 2 mid-level demigods. The 3 heaven-defying supremes were Supreme Radiant, Supreme Thunder Fong, and a Supreme covered in white bones. Of the 2 mid-level demigods, one was short and had goat horns, and the other was a 3-headed, 6-armed ancient life form of the universe. Supremacy Light was absorbing the law of light fragments. Supremacy Thunderfong was absorbing the law of thunder fragments, and the other Supremacy Heaven-defying was absorbing the law of white bone fragments. Based on their speed, it would take them at least 1,000 years to completely absorb the law of light fragments. After all, the law of light fragments here was simply too big. As for the 2 mid-level demigods, they were absorbing the god's blood. They could only absorb a bit of God's blood at a time, and this bit of God's blood was just a drop in the ocean compared to the total amount of God's blood. Yi-Chen's arrival did not cause any commotion. The 5 of them did not even look at Yi-Chen. There was no need to engage in a meaningless fight. Law of water fragment. Yi-Chen stared at the fist-sized law of water fragment. This law of water fragment was too big. It was dozens of times bigger than the one Yi-Chen had absorbed before. It was sparkling and translucent, emitting a lustrous glow. After absorbing this fragment of the law of water, my law of water will increase by at least 10 times. Dozens of times the power of the water rule. This was not a dozen times increase in battle prowess, but tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of times. His battle prowess would probably soar directly to the level of a high-level demigod. Of course, whether he could completely absorb it was another matter. No one knew how much power of the law a heaven-defying supreme could have. Floating up, Yi-Chen slowly approached the fragment of the law of water. Splash! The law of water sensed Yi-Chen's approach, and a wave of water rippled over, enveloping Yi-Chen. Yi-Chen realized that after his cultivation broke through to the quasi-demigod level, the power of the law of water had doubled. It was much easier for him to absorb the law of water fragment, and it did not cause much repulsion or resistance. Bit by bit, Yi-Chen slowly absorbed the power of the law of water fragment. 20 years passed. 50 years passed. During this period, Honorable Light opened his eyes once and frowned. He had been here for more than 100 years, but the power of the law of light he absorbed was very little. As time passed, the power of the law of light he could absorb was also decreasing. 100 years passed. Honorable Light stopped absorbing the power of the law of light. He could no longer absorb the power of the law of light. His martial yuan spirit had reached its limit. If it was not for the divine force crystal in his body, he would not be able to fight for a long time. Otherwise, his martial yuan spirit would collapse, and he would die from the power of the law of light. Since I can't absorb the power of the law of light, I'll absorb the god's blood first. To Honorable Light, the god's blood was also very important. He might be able to use the god's blood to become an elementary demigod. Once he became an elementary demigod, his strength would definitely be among the powerful demigods, or even stronger. Who is it? Seeing that someone came to absorb the god's blood, the 2 mid-level demigods quickly looked over. Me? Why would I have an opinion? Honorable Light glanced at the 2 of them. These 2 mid-level demigods were definitely powerful mid-level demigods. After absorbing so much God's blood, they should have gained a lot of benefits. So it's Honorable Light. The 2 of them did not dare to offend Honorable Light, so they closed their eyes again. On the 150th and 180th years, the skeleton covered Honorable against heaven, and Honorable Thunder Tooth stopped absorbing the power of the law of light and started absorbing the god's blood. The two mid-level demigods did not say anything, as they felt that the two of them were not to be trifled with. On the 200th year, on the 300th year, on the 500th year, what surprised the five was that Yi Chun had been absorbing the power of the law of light. His soul and martial yuan spirit seemed to have no limit. Could it be that his absorption is very slow? No, the fragment of the law of light has shrunk quite a bit, but his absorption speed is not slow at all. Even Yi Chun himself could not understand why he could continue absorbing. One must know that when he first started to comprehend the power of the law of light, he had also suffered from the backlash of the power of the law of light, and he did not dare to use it too much. On the 700th year, Yi Chun finally could not continue absorbing the power of the law of light. His soul and martial yuan spirit had reached a saturation state and could no longer withstand the more powerful power of the law of light. Naturally, Yi Chun turned his gaze to the god's blood. Chapter 1443. The amount of God's blood was sufficient. The five of them had not finished absorbing it, even after such a long time. There was still more than half left. God's blood contains the essence of a true god's god power. Whether or not I can become a primary demigod in the primal chaos battlefield depends on it. Yi Chun was very clear that there would be more experts in the primal chaos battlefield in the later stages. This was because the vast primal chaos battlefield could not only have one god's relic. There would definitely be other gods' relics or opportunities. If he did not improve, others would. Don't think that the five supremes were very powerful. As long as one of them became a primary demigod, the five supremes would have to step aside. Of course, it was also possible for the five supremes to become primary demigods. At that time, no one would be able to defeat them. Yi Chun did not wish to die in the primal chaos battlefield and become someone else's stepping stone. Therefore, he had to seize every opportunity to strengthen himself. As long as he was the strongest, the primal chaos battlefield would be like his backyard. Only he could kill others, and no one would be able to kill him. In this way, it would be much easier to find Su Jing and Murong Qingsheng. The legendary Heaven Realm should be filled with dangers. It is imperative to become a primary demigod. Besides the primal chaos battlefield, the legendary Heaven Realm also made Yi Chun feel a bit of pressure. It was not wrong to work hard to improve his strength. Seeing Yi Chun looking at the god's blood, the two mid-level demigods were a bit anxious. They were mid-level demigods. The amount of god's blood they needed to become advanced demigods was far more than what the Supremes needed to become primary demigods. However, these Supremes were not ordinary people. The speed at which they absorbed the god's blood was very fast. It was almost 1% of what they needed. Don't think that 1% was a lot. In fact, if converted into years, it might be hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. With one more Yi Chun, they would have to cultivate for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. Honorable light, the amount of God's blood is limited. If you Supremes want to become primary demigods, it will be much harder than ordinary demigods to become primary demigods. A mid-level demigod transmitted his voice to honorable light. Supremacy of light sneered. You want to kill me with a borrowed knife? Yi Chun had been absorbing water law fragments for a total of 700 years. No one present dared to say that they could kill Yi Chun. Even the light overlord did not have the confidence to do so. Although the water law was a fundamental law, the more one comprehended it, the more terrifying it would be. His light law was inferior to Yi Chun's water law in terms of realm. You've misunderstood. We just want to cooperate with you and get rid of this brat first. Then, we'll get rid of Tiger Fong's sovereign and Bone Devil sovereign. Another mid-level demigod explained. Oh, the Exalt of Light's expression did not change as he sent a voice transmission. The two of you are mid-level demigods and have absorbed much more god blood than us exalted heaven-defying exalts. Why don't I choose to work with the three of them to deal with the two of you? Haha, Honorable Radiant. Even though you are one of the five honorables, it would still be difficult for you to kill a mid-level demigod, let alone me and Battle Sage Liao Yin. That's right. We mid-level demigods have rich sources. Our foundation is more than 10,000 times that of you, exalted heaven-defying exalts. If you want to kill us, you have to be many times stronger than us. Of these two mid-level demigods, one was the ancient hoof battle sage from the Earth-Piercer cosmos, and the other was the ancient multiverses battle sage Liao Yin. Both of them were experts among mid-level demigods. In a one-on-one situation, they were indeed inferior to the Exalt of Light, and perhaps even Tiger Fong Sovereign. However, it was almost impossible for the two of them to kill them. Even if they stood still and did not put up any defense, it would still take a long time for them to be killed. This was the terror of mid-level demigods. You guys are very confident. However, what you said makes sense. Thinking about how difficult it was to kill mid-level demigods, the Exalt of Light frowned. Several thousand years ago, he had chased after an ordinary mid-level demigod. His strength was many times stronger than his opponent, but he still failed to kill him after several years. Perhaps he could have killed him if he had spent a little more time, but he was impatient. It was too much of a waste of time. Killing a mid-level demigod was not worth it. The ancient Hoof Battle Sage and Liao Yin Battle Sage before him were not ordinary mid-level demigods. The difficulty of killing them was more than 10,000 times higher. However, this person has absorbed the law of water fragment for 700 years. I wonder what level his strength has reached. Thinking of Yi Chun, the Exalt of Light felt some regret. If he had known that Yi Chun had such amazing potential, he would have killed Yi Chun long ago. At that time, killing Yi Chun would not require much effort. Exalt of Light, what are you afraid of? Even if we can't kill him, he can't do anything to us. We won't know until we try. All right, the Exalt of Light agreed. Just as the ancient Hoof Battle Sage had said, he might not be able to do anything to Yi Chun, but Yi Chun would not be able to do anything to him either. The power of the Law of Light was not only reflected in combat strength. In addition to communicating with the Exalt of Light, the ancient Hoof Battle Sage and Liao Yin Battle Sage had also informed the Tiger Fong Supremacy and the Bone Demon Supremacy. The Bone Demon Supremacy had agreed, but the Tiger Fong Supremacy had not. After this person is dead, it might be my turn. The Tiger Fong Supremacy sneered in his heart. He planned to help Yi Chun when he could no longer hold on. Not for others, but for himself. Yi Chun did not seem to notice the forced strangeness. He rapidly approached the god blood, ready to take a share. Brat, get lost. At this time, the ancient Hoof Battle Sage, Liao Yin Battle Sage, the Exalt of Light, and the Bone Demon Supremacy launched a joint attack at Yi Chun. The ancient Hoof Battle Sage sent out countless hoof prints, each one seemingly engraved in the void. The Exalt of Light's 6 arms each slashed out a flaming saber light. The Exalt of Light's attack was the most magnificent, like a sun, shooting countless rays of light at Yi Chun. The Bone Demon Supremacy put his hands together and separated, shooting countless bone spears at Yi Chun. In the current Primal Chaos battlefield, the four were undoubtedly the top and most terrifying characters. If the four of them joined forces to attack one person, then that person would die without a doubt. Facing this desperate situation, Yi Chun's eyes were solemn, but also excited. After absorbing the law of water fragment for 700 years, he did not know what level his strength had reached. This was the perfect opportunity. However, he did not dare to be careless. Once he could no longer hold on, he would immediately leave and give up on the god blood. It's not certain who'll get lost. With a roar, Yi Chun turned into a waterman. Shortly after, the waterman stirred up monstrous waves that swept in all directions, submerging more than half of the 15th floor. The rumbling waves caused the 15th floor to slightly tremble, as if a peerless beast was about to awaken. As soon as the ancient Hoof Battle Sage's hoofprints fell into the water, their speed sharply decreased, and they lost more than half of their power. Liao Yin Battle Sage's flaming saber light gradually extinguished, emitting a faint glow. The Bone Demon Supremacy's bone spear was very sharp, piercing through 90% of the waves and almost hitting Yi Chun. As for the Exalt of Light's light ray, it was the most terrifying, almost piercing through the waves in an instant. However, It was ultimately blocked by Yi Chen's firmament sword. What? The four were shocked. This was their strongest attack, but it could not do anything to Yi Chen. Chapter 1444. Take a strike from me as well. After blocking out the combined attack of the four, Yi Chen took a deep breath and threw out a wavy sword attack toward the four of them. That aggressive wave of sword light almost reached the four of them within a second. Puff! Liao Qian Battle Sage and Bone Devil Sovereign each spat out a mouthful of blood and flew back in a sorry state. Light Sovereign was indeed one of the five sovereigns. Although his law of light was not as strong as Yi Chen's law of water, he still blocked Yi Chen's attack without taking a step back. His body emitted endless radiance. Damn it! Liao Yin Battle Sage and Ancient Hoof Battle Sage had ugly expressions. Yi Chen's strength was beyond their expectations. He was definitely at the level of Light Sovereign. He was not someone that could be defeated with numbers. None of them are to be trifled with. Yi Chen raised his eyebrows. Although the power of that strike was dispersed, it was not too much. Not to mention Light Sovereign, the other three only spat out a mouthful of blood. In a one-on-one fight, Yi Chen was confident that he could suppress them, but it would be difficult to kill them. Everyone, I'll take it as a joke. Let's mind our own business from now on. Yi Chen said. Continuing to fight was not beneficial to anyone. All right, we were the villains. Light Sovereign admitted his mistake and continued to absorb the god blood. Humph! Liao Yin Battle Sage and Ancient Hoof Battle Sage snorted and returned to their original positions. Bone Devil Sovereign chuckled, as if nothing had happened just now, his expression unchanged. Brother, I am Tiger Fong Sovereign. I admire you. Tiger Fong Sovereign transmitted his voice to Yi Chen. I am Sword Sovereign Green Lotus. Yi Chen, who was absorbing the first strand of god blood, replied. Sword Sovereign Green Lotus, there is still 80 to 90% of the god blood left. It may help one or more of us break through. Since we are alone, why don't we work together? Once I break through to elementary demigod, I will protect you. On the other hand, when you break through to elementary demigod, you must protect me. Of course, this is only a suggestion. The decision is up to you. Tiger Fong Sovereign said. No problem. Yi Chen had a good impression of the Tiger Fong Sovereign. At the very least, the Tiger Fong Sovereign did not attack him. Brother, you're really straightforward. Tiger Fong revealed a faint smile. Yi Chen was much more straightforward than he had imagined. What was divine power? Divine power was the combination of all types of power, excluding the power of laws. Divine power contained energy, heart force, willpower, domain, and so on. The more powerful one's divine power was, the more powerful one's strength would be. It could be said that after becoming a powerful demigod, the strength of a powerful demigod would be judged by divine power and the power of laws. There was nothing else. The blood of a true god was a treasure of heaven and earth. It contained the purest divine power. Unfortunately, other than powerful demigods, no one could directly convert the ownerless divine power into their own divine power. Most people below the level of a powerful demigod could only use the ownerless divine power to increase their own cultivation. They could not convert it directly, and there would definitely be a lot of waste in the process. After continuously absorbing the god blood, Yi Chen gradually understood the profoundness of divine power. This kind of power was definitely the ultimate power, the most violent power. However, the power of laws was different. It was the power of rules, the way to use power. It was like a technique that could increase the power of one's power by many times. So that's how it is. One of the requirements to condense divine power is to have the light of the soul. Above the heart sword realm was the sword of the soul, which was also the light of the soul. Only the light of the soul could control all kinds of power and condense divine power. Otherwise, divine power would easily collapse and be unable to be preserved. After understanding a part of the profoundness of divine power, Yi Chen's horizons had been broadened. A part of the obstacles to cultivation also seemed to have disappeared. Crackle. In the process of absorbing the god blood, Yi Chen's spirit body continued to improve from mid-rank 9 to late rank 9. His strength increased greatly, and his body seemed to have endless power. This was different from Sword Yuan. The two were different kinds of power, and they would both become a part of divine power in the future and have their own uses. Other than that, Yi Qin's Green Lotus Ore domain realm was also slowly improving, from early rank 9 to mid-rank 9. In fact, the reason why Yi Qin improved so quickly was because his foundation was weak and he hadn't reached a very high realm. On the other hand, the light supremacy and the others had already reached a very high realm in all aspects, so they couldn't improve much in a short period of time. The only improvement they could make was a breakthrough in their cultivation and becoming a low-rank demigod. Pop! Finally, Yi Qin's Green Lotus Ore domain broke through from early rank 9 to mid-rank 9, and his strength improved again. Of course, Yi Qin also knew that although the Green Lotus Ore domain had improved by a level, it wasn't very useful. At the current stage, his opponents were all terrifying people, and the mid-rank 9 sword domain could only cancel out the opponent's domain. At most, it could suppress it slightly, but it wouldn't have much of an impact. The key was still to rely on absolute strength. However, if the Green Lotus Ore domain could break through to late rank 9, he would be able to easily suppress others. He had to take it step by step. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed, and there was still 60 to 70% of the god blood left. During this period, a dozen people had made it from the 14th underground floor to the 15th underground floor. Unfortunately, they were very unlucky, and they were killed by Yi Qin's group of 6 before they could even absorb the fragments of the laws. They didn't want to let others have a share, and they didn't want to raise a tiger that would bring them trouble. After all, once one absorbed a large amount of the laws, it would be very hard to kill them. Yi Qin was a living example. Another 1,000 years had passed, and there was still half of the god blood left. How can I miss out on absorbing the god blood? On this day, a figure came from the 14th underground floor to the 15th floor. It was a heaven-defying supreme filled with endless death aura, and his eyes were emitting a frightening light. The Dead Supreme. The light's supremacy revealed a look of fear. The Dead Supreme was one of the 5 supremacies, and what he comprehended was the Death Law, which was one of the top laws like the Light Law. Moreover, from the looks of it, he should have obtained a lot of benefits in other places. The Death Aura was extremely dense, and his realm was no lower than the Light Supreme. Let's deal with him together. The Light Supremacy suddenly said. All right, everyone, including Yi Qin, agreed one after another. Kill. The 6 of them unleashed a powerful attack, blasting at the Dead Supreme. You want to kill me? In your next life. I comprehended the Death Law, and I'm already in a state of death. How can you kill me? The Dead Supreme did not care about the attack that was blasting at him, and he took it head-on. In this way, the Dead Supreme also joined the ranks of absorbing the god blood, and the number of people became 7 from 6. On the 4,000 years, only 40% of the god blood was left, and the battle broke out again. This time, it was Yi Qin's group of 5 against the Ancient Hoof Battle Sage and the Burning Sky Battle Sage. The main reason was that the 2 absorbed the god blood too quickly. The 5 decided to spend some time to kill the 2, even if it took them 1 or 2,000 years. Chapter 1445. Do you really think we're pushovers that you can bully? Humph, since you want to expel us, then don't even think about absorbing the divine blood. The 2 were fearless. They had absorbed most of the divine blood, and their cultivation had improved rapidly. Their gold primordial spirits had reached the peak of mid-stage, which was many times stronger than before. Kill. Supremacy of Light was the first to attack the 2. Countless rays of light shot out. PFFF. The 2 retreated with difficulty, blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. Supremacy of Light's attacks were very domineering. Each ray of light was extraordinarily powerful. They had no way to fight back. The Sovereign of the Dead's attack was much more bizarre. He rubbed his hands together, and thousands of poisonous snakes made of black mist pounced at the Green Hoof Battle Sage and Scorching Sky Battle Sage, leaving shallow marks on their bodies. These shallow marks were like living creatures, slowly wriggling and absorbing the vitality and aura of the two. Of course, mid-level demigods were mid-level demigods. With a flash of light, all the shallow marks disappeared as if they had never existed. The Sovereign of the Dead was not surprised by this. The Ancient Hoof War Sage and the Burning Sky War Sage were peak mid-level demigods. Other than high-level demigods, no one could easily kill them. It would take a long time to kill them. Whoosh! If Supremacy of Light's attacks were domineering and Supremacy of the Dead strange, then Yi Chen's attacks were mighty and endless. In terms of offensive power, even Light Supreme was inferior to Yi Chen. In the void, the blue sword light converged to form an ocean wave that battered Ancient Hoof Battle Saint and Burning Sky Battle Saint, forcing them to retreat without a trace of power to counterattack. As for Tiger Fong and Bone Devil, they were much weaker than the three, but they could more or less exhaust the Ancient Hoof War Saint and Scorching Sky War Saint's origin energy. Their usefulness was not to be underestimated. After 100 years, the Ancient Hoof War Saint and Scorching Sky War Saint's auras had weakened significantly. Damn it. After 100 years of beating, the Ancient Hoof Battle Saint's eyes were almost spewing fire. I'll let you be arrogant for now. Let's see how long you can keep attacking. Scorching Sky Battle Saint said fiercely. After 1,000 years, the two's auras had weakened by more than 30%. It's actually so hard to kill. Even though they had mentally prepared themselves, Yi Chen and the others were still shocked. Originally, they had estimated that they would be able to kill the two of them in 1,000 years. Unexpectedly, the two of them had only weakened by 30%. Although the two of them would become weaker as time passed, it would definitely take more than 2,000 years to completely kill them. What surprised Yi Chen and the others even more was that in the next 500 years, the auras of the two war saints did not decline. Instead, they grew stronger and recovered to 80% of their original strength. As it turned out, although the two of them had been in a state of constant beatings, it had also played a role in tempering themselves. The divine blood they had absorbed earlier had quickly turned into nutrients to replenish their bodies. This won't do. If this continues, they might not die. Instead, we will be exhausted to death. The Exalt of Light frowned. That's right. They're using us to transform the power in the god's blood, Yi Chen said as he exhaled. Why don't we take turns to attack them, and the rest will absorb the god's blood? The Venerable of the Dead suggested. How should we distribute it? Bone Devil Supreme's eyes flashed. It's very simple. 3 people attack, and 2 people absorb the god's blood. We'll rotate once every 100 years. In the 100th year, Yi Chen, the Venerable of the Dead, and the Venerable of the Dead attacked the War Saints, while the Venerable of Light and the Venerable of Tiger Fong absorbed the god's blood. Seeing this situation, the War Saints and the Venerable of the Dead's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Previously, they were still in the mood to waste time with Yi Chen and the others, but now they had completely lost the mood. After a long time, the remaining god's blood would definitely be absorbed, and there would be no share for them. They still wanted to rely on the god's blood to advance to high-level demigods. Damn it, die for me. The War Saints of the Dead and the Venerable of the Dead erupted with their strongest combat strength. Before this, they were only ordinary combat strength. Unfortunately, Yi Chen and the Venerable of the Dead were not to be trifled with. They easily suppressed the two, and no matter how much they roared, they could do nothing. After 100 years, it was the Venerable of Light, the Venerable of the Dead, and Yi Chen attacking the two, while the Venerable of the Dead and the Venerable of the Dead absorbed the god's blood. Because only 2 people could absorb the god's blood at a time, it was still not Yi Chen's turn this time. But it didn't matter. He would be compensated later, and no one was willing to suffer a loss. Soon, 1,000 years passed. The god's blood shrank slightly, but there was not much change. The 5 were, after all, heaven-defying supremes. Their efficiency of absorbing the god's blood was far lower than that of mid-level demigods, especially when 3 of them had to deal with the War Saints. Too slow. Altogether, 6 or 7,000 years had passed. Yi Chen felt that the efficiency of absorbing the god's blood was too slow. At this rate, it would take at least tens of thousands of years. The higher the cultivation, the faster the absorption. It has little to do with strength. Yi Chun thought. Unknowingly, Yi Chun had been in the 15th underground floor for 9,000 years. With a scream, the battle saint of the dead instantly turned into a ball of golden flames, burning. This was the burning of the gold martial path Yuan spirit. The golden ashes danced in the air, and the next moment, they returned to nothingness. The battle saint of the dead had fallen. After spending 5,000 years, the five finally killed the battle saint of the dead. This was mainly related to the distribution. Every 100 years, 2 of the 5 would be able to rest and absorb the god's blood. The war saint of the dead and the battle saint of the dead were constantly fighting and had no time to rest. Moreover, they couldn't find the exit to the 15th underground floor, so they couldn't even escape. In the 9,500th year, the war saint of the dead was forced to his limit. Faint golden sparks flickered on his body, a sign that the gold martial path Yuan's spirit was burning. Bastard, I can't accept this. The war saint of the dead roared at the sky. The battle prowess that erupted shocked even the venerable of light, the dead, and the bone devil supremes. This was the final radiance of the dead, and was no small matter. Come on. The venerable of light sped up. The venerable of dead and the bone devil supremes nodded. As long as the war saint of the dead was taken care of, they could calm down and absorb the god's blood. In any case, their absorption speed was very slow, so they didn't need to worry about not having enough god's blood to absorb. As for the future, no one could be bothered. Swoosh! The war saint of the dead was instantly engulfed by the golden flames. Careful! Suddenly, the venerable of dead seemed to have discovered something and disappeared from his original position. The venerable of light's reaction was a bit slower than the venerable of dead's, but the venerable of light was faster and immediately retreated. Only the bone devil supremes couldn't react in time and was struck by a powerful flaming hoof print. Puffed. The bone devil supremes didn't even have time to groan before disappearing into nothingness. Chapter 1446. This aura. In the distance, the light sovereign and the dead sovereign solemnly looked at the golden flames. Within the golden flames, a figure gradually became clear. Pop! The flames extinguished, revealing the figure of the Greenhoof War Saint. At this moment, the Greenhoof War Saint was clearly taller, his powerful muscles almost bursting through his clothes. His arms were so thick that they seemed capable of tearing the sky apart. The pair of goat horns on his head were especially prominent, flashing with a cold light. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! Waves of terrifying aura spread out from the Greenhoof War Saint. The light sovereign and the dead sovereign clearly felt a strong pressure, their breathing becoming heavier. High-grade demigod? The dead sovereign's expression was unsightly, and the light sovereign was not much better. Above high-grade demigods were powerful demigods. There was no need to mention powerful demigods. Not only did they have divine power, but they also had the power of laws. All below a powerful demigod were ants, including high-grade demigods. But no matter what, a high-grade demigod was still a high-grade demigod, not something a mid-grade demigod could compare to. The golden Yuan spirit had reached the late stage. The light sovereign and the dead sovereign were not afraid of any mid-grade demigod. Even if they could not win, they could at least escape. But against a high-grade demigod, they had no confidence. Ha. The Greenhoof War Saint laughed until tears flowed down his cheeks. High-grade demigod. I actually became a high-grade demigod. Is this true? With that, the Greenhoof War Saint clenched his right hand. A shock wave burst out. Pop, pop. The light sovereign and the dead sovereign were blown away, each vomiting blood. Haha, it's true. The Greenhoof War Saint laughed wildly, his expression excited. After becoming a demigod, each advancement was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. If one was lucky, they might be able to advance in a few million years. If not, it might take tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of years. This was especially true for mid-grade demigods to become high-grade demigods. Even with the help of divine blood, the Greenhoof War Saint did not think that he could become a high-grade demigod in the primal chaos battlefield. But he did not expect that he would break through and become a high-grade demigod in this desperate situation. Of course, this was mainly because he had absorbed a lot of divine blood, which provided him with sufficient nutrients. I have to thank you for all this. If you did not force me into a desperate situation, I would not have become a high-grade demigod so quickly. The Greenhoof War Saint regained his composure and looked at the Light Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign with a teasing expression. The Light Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign pupils constricted. Run! The two of them turned into a ray of light and a wisp of black mist, quickly escaping. The 15th underground level was very large. Every inch of space had been transformed by the divine blood. It was like a small universe. Trying to escape? The Greenhoof War Saint didn't do anything, but his location began to shake. A moment later, space twisted as he appeared behind the Radiant Autarch and punched. Just as the deep hoof print was about to engrave itself onto the Radiant Supremacy's body, the Radiant Supremacy abruptly transformed into a golden sun, turning from a corporeal body into an incorporeal body. Puff! The hoof print pierced through the golden sun, causing it to shatter. It then reformed into the body of the Sovereign of Light. However, his face was extremely pale. Relying on the law of light, he had withstood the attack of the Greenhoof Battle Saint, but a high-grade demigod was too powerful. Even in his incorporeal form, he was still heavily injured. It was easy to imagine that once he returned to his physical form, he would undoubtedly die. How enviable! The law of light is even greater than I imagined. The ancient Hoof War Saint was indignant. He hated all heaven-defying supremes for being able to comprehend laws in advance. This was too unfair. Swordsman Azure Lotus, the situation isn't looking good. Tiger Fong and Yi Chun had already noticed the changes in the Greenhoof War Saint. Tiger Fong said in a low voice, "You find the exit first. Take the chance to kill the Radiant Supremacy and the Dead Supremacy," Yi Chun said. "What about you?" Tiger Fong looked at Yi Chun. "I plan to give it a try." Yi Chun felt that the three Supreme Sword Intents were showing signs of a breakthrough. After coming to the Primal Chaos battlefield, the three Supreme Sword Intents had already broken through once, from early stage to mid-stage 9th rank. This greatly increased his strength. He originally thought that it would be impossible for him to continue breaking through in the Primal Chaos battlefield. Even if he wanted to break through, he would probably have to wait until he became an elementary demigod. However, after absorbing 9,000 years of divine blood, the three Supreme Sword Intents had the possibility of breaking through again. Of course, this was mainly because the three Supreme Sword Intents existed in Yi Chen's Soul Sea at the same time, creating a resonance effect. If there was only one Supreme Sword Intent, it would be impossible for him to break through so quickly. Get a try? All right, I'll take my leave first. Sensing that Yi Chen wasn't joking, Tiger Fong nodded and quickly left. I don't think I can escape, even if I try to escape now. I might as well give it a try. If there was an exit, Yi Chun would not hesitate to escape from it. Unfortunately, the exit to the 15th floor had not been found yet. Wasting time searching for an exit was unacceptable to Yi Chun. Floating near the god's blood, Yi Chun closed his eyes and continued to absorb the god's blood. Run! Why aren't you running anymore? Puff! Poo pu! Poo pu 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 pu. The ancient Hoof War Saint laughed maniacally as he pierced through the golden sun and black mist again and again. The laws of light and death were indeed powerful. In terms of power, the ancient Hoof War Saint was at least 10,000 times stronger than the Radiant Sovereign and King Sovereign. Alas, he still couldn't kill the two in a short time. He could only heavily injure them and wear down their martial nascent spirits. Ancient Hoof War Saint, why are you so ruthless? If you can spare me, I'm willing to become your servant. The Sovereign of the Dead said humbly. Comprehending the law of death made him cherish his life even more and would not easily give up. Servant? Sorry, I don't need it. I just want to see you die. The ancient Hoof War Saint grinned and continued to attack. Again and again. No! The golden sun burst into millions of rays, and the roar of the Radiant Sovereign could be heard. Unfortunately, The rays could no longer condense and gradually disappeared into the void. One of the five sovereigns, the Radiant Sovereign, had fallen. The Sovereign of the Dead's heart tightened, and he frantically fled. In terms of survivability, the law of death was much stronger than the law of light, but the difference in strength was too great. The Sovereign of the Dead still could not escape death. The black mist dissipated and a black seed fell. Crack! The ancient hoof-war saint shattered the black seed. The law of death was strange and unpredictable, so he did not think that the Sovereign of the Dead was completely dead. Sure enough, the moment the black seed shattered, the Sovereign of the Dead screamed and stopped abruptly. After killing the Radiant Sovereign and the Sovereign of the Dead, the ancient hoof-war saint began to chase after Tiger Fong. A year later, Supreme Tiger Fong fell. In the end, it was Yi Chun, who did not take any action, who survived. You're very lucky that you didn't take any action. That's why I left you for last. The ancient hoof-war saint walked towards Yi Chun step by step, each step causing the void to tremble. Chapter 1447. Next to the divine blood, Yi Chun opened his eyes and turned to look at the green hoof-war saint. With the fall of the Radiant Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign, Yi Chun knew that the green hoof-war saint was no longer the same as before. He now had the ability to kill the five sovereigns. This was something that no mid-level demigod could do. Green hoof-war saint, I didn't think that the Radiant Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign would die in your hands. They must be very unwilling, Yi Chun said. The green hoof-war saint grinned. They were indeed unwilling, but they brought this upon themselves. However, they were also very lucky to be killed by a high-ranked demigod. Outside of the legendary celestial realm, I'm afraid no one has ever seen a high-ranked demigod. Indeed, this is the first time I've seen one. Yi Chun nodded. In his eyes, the green hoof-war saint was millions of times more dazzling than the sun. This was the sign of a gold primordial spirit reaching its peak. How about it? Do you still need me to do it? The green hoof-war saint looked at Yi Chun mockingly. After becoming a high-ranked demigod, he would be able to absorb the divine blood even faster. In a few years, he would be able to absorb the rest. But before that, he had to deal with Yi Chun. As for how, he had not decided yet. He would do it in a way that was more interesting. Do it. Yi Chun unsheathed the firmament sword. Die. The green hoof-war saint suddenly punched at Yi Chun. Clang. Sparks flew everywhere. Yi Chun's face turned pale as he was sent flying. The green hoof-war saint was a little surprised. He had only used 10 to 20% of his power, but if it was the Radiant Sovereign or the Dead Sovereign, they would definitely be gravely injured. Why did his opponent only turn pale? Something was wrong? Again, the green hoof-war saint once again punched at Yi Chun. This time, he used 30 to 40% of his power. Spurting out a mouthful of blood, Yi Chun continued to fly. Again. The green hoof-war saint used 100% of his power in this last punch. Pop! An invisible force was transmitted into Yi Chun's body, causing Yi Chun's body to tremble. In the next moment, he opened his mouth and spat out a large amount of blood. Cracks also appeared on his body. Impossible. Supremacy of light and supremacy of death were able to resist for so long because of their incorporeal forms. They received very little damage each time, only 1,000th or even a 10,000th of their actual damage. If Yi Chun used the law of water to turn incorporeal, he could accept it, but Yi Chun didn't use this ability at all. How did you do it? The ancient hoof-war saint stared at Yi Chun. Yi Chun heaved a sigh of relief and smiled faintly. Thank you for giving me enough time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to raise my sword intent to the late stage of the 9th rank. Indeed, Yi Chun's 3 supreme sword intents had broken through to the late stage of the 9th rank. The higher one's sword intent was, the harder it was to improve. This was especially true for supreme sword intents. Once they broke through, their combat prowess would increase greatly. One had to know that at the late stage of the 9th rank, one was only one level away from the peak of the 9th rank, which was the limit of sword intent. Of course, a heaven-defying sovereign was still a heaven-defying sovereign. If it was any of the 5 sovereigns who had reached the late stage of the 9th rank, they still wouldn't be a match for the Greenhoof War Saint. However, among Yi Qin's 3 supreme sword intents was the Immortal sword intent. It was called Immortal and had an indestructible attribute. Apart from that, he also had the Black Tortoise sacred armor and the Immortal sword physique. With the continuous improvement of the Immortal sword intent, Yi Qin's Immortal sword physique reached the 17th level, allowing him to contend against an elementary demigod's attack. A late-stage, 9th rank, supreme sword intent, the Greenhoof War Saint narrowed his eyes. He didn't comprehend a supreme martial intent, but a lower-grade one. Even so, he still couldn't break through to the late stage of the 9th rank and was stuck at the peak of the mid-stage of the 9th rank. Yi Qin, a mere heaven-defying sovereign, had actually reached the late stage of the 9th rank. The Greenhoof War Saint didn't know whether he should admire or be jealous of Yi Qin. Even if you can hold on for a while, I don't believe you can hold on for 100 or even 1,000 years. The more stunning Yi Qin's performance was, the more the Greenhoof War Saint couldn't let Yi Qin live. Otherwise, once Yi Qin became an elementary demigod, no one would be able to stop him. Wisps of golden flames ignited on his body, and the aura of the Greenhoof War Saint increased by 1,000 times. A demigod's secret art? Yi Qin was startled. Die! The Greenhoof War Saint punched at Yi Qin. This punch was incomprehensibly fast. Even time and space began to reverse, and Yi Qin's reaction time was stretched. PFFF. Unprepared, Yi Qin spurted out a large amount of blood. Countless cracks appeared on his body, and he was instantly gravely injured. Even a large portion of his martial Dao nascent spirit was obliterated. No matter how powerful the Immortal sword intent was, it couldn't perfectly defend against extreme combat power. He actually burned his gold martial Dao nascent spirit to obtain destructive power. Yi Qin didn't dare to be careless. He activated the law of water and instantly turned into a waterman. At the same time, ripples appeared around him as if he was in a world of water. The next moment, the Greenhoof War Saint attacked again. The world of water was instantly pierced through, and the waterman Yi Qin turned into was also destroyed. But soon, the water condensed and turned back into a waterman. Turning incorporeal allowed Yi Qin to ignore the majority of the damage, just like the Radiant Sovereign and the Dead Sovereign. 1 year passed. 10 years passed. 100 years passed. The Greenhoof War Saint finally stopped burning his gold martial Dao and nascent spirit. He glared angrily at Yi Qin. After becoming a high-ranked demigod, he could burn his gold martial Dao nascent spirit to increase his combat power, but it couldn't last long. He could only last for 100 years thanks to the remaining god blood. Even so, the consumption was still great. On the other hand, Yi Qin didn't consume too much. The god blood in his body allowed him to last longer. Damn, if my martial intent can reach late-stage 9th order, I can definitely kill him, the Greenhoof War Saint thought. Sword Venerable Azure Lotus, I'll let you go for now. Hurry up and get out of the 15th floor. The Greenhoof War Saint turned and flew toward the god blood. Since he couldn't kill Yi Qin, he could only absorb the remaining god blood. Perhaps he could break through. Even if you want me to leave, I won't. Yi Qin also flew toward the god blood. You're courting death. The Greenhoof War Saint snorted. He didn't expect Yi Qin to be so daring to stay. Fine, once he broke through again, it would be the death of Yi Qin. Just like that, the Greenhoof War Saint and Yi Qin absorbed the god blood and minded their own business. Too slow. Seeing the rate at which the Greenhoof War Saint was absorbing the god blood, Yi Qin frowned. His absorption speed was only 1% of the Greenhoof War Saint's, which was too disadvantageous. I'll comprehend the power of laws first. Yi Qin gave up on absorbing the god blood. In any case, he hadn't used up all the god blood in his body and had stored away. Metal gave birth to water, and water gave birth to wood. Yi Qin set his goal on the law of wood fragment. If he could comprehend the law of wood and the law of water and wood, his strength would reach a new peak. Chapter 1448. The wood law fragment was a thumb-sized seed. The seed was emerald green and brimming with endless vitality. The space around the seed was affected by this vitality, causing hundreds of flowers to blossom and vegetation to grow. When he was still some distance away from the wood law fragment, a dense forest blocked Yi Chen's path. The vines in the forest grew rapidly, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Whoosh! The world of water rippled, protecting Yi Chen. Meanwhile, Yi Chen used the world of water as a medium to sense the wood law fragment's existence. Metal gave birth to water, and water gave birth to wood. When the law of water came into contact with the wood law, it suffered much less resistance. Pushing aside the vines, Yi Chen gradually approached the wood law fragment. When he was only 10 meters away from the wood law fragment, a green radiance suddenly appeared. No matter how hard Yi Chen pushed the law of water, he couldn't advance an inch. Realizing that he couldn't get any closer, Yi Chen stopped and gently pressed his right hand on the green radiance. This was the manifestation of the wood law. With the protection of the world of water, he could safely touch it. The wood law was full of vitality. Vitality could save people and kill people. For example, a heavily injured person on the verge of death could be instantly healed by injecting the law of wood. However, if a seed was planted in a healthy person, once the seed grew, it could kill the healthy person. The law of wood contained life and death. Of course, it only contained a part of life and death. The true life and death were the law of life and the law of death. Want to comprehend a second law? The greenhoof battle Saint looked over with a cold glint in his eyes. If Yi Chen comprehended a second law, it would be difficult to deal with him. Whether it was a peak law, a powerful law, or a foundational law, each law had its own unique aspect and couldn't be underestimated. Even the greenhoof battle Saint wasn't sure how much of a boost the two laws would have to one's combat prowess. A heaven-defying sovereign comprehending a second law is 10 times harder than comprehending a first law. I don't believe you can do it. Taking a deep breath, the greenhoof battle Saint closed his eyes and didn't look at Yi Chen. Right now, the most pressing matter at hand was to absorb all the god blood and strive for another breakthrough. Once his martial will broke through to the late Ninth Order, his strength would increase tremendously. At that time, regardless of whether Yi Chen comprehended the second type of law or not, it would have no effect on him. Comprehending the law of wood was smoother than Yi Chen had imagined. Perhaps it was because he had comprehended the law of water and had reached a very high level in the law of water. In Yi Chen's perception, he seemed to see countless green dots of light. These green dots of light were very gentle, like little fairies dancing in the air. One day, the green spots gathered together, increasing in number until they finally formed a green seed. The seed fell to the ground and sprouted, growing into a small tree. The small tree was weathered by the wind and rain, and it gradually grew into a towering tree. Its branches were luxuriant, and it was overflowing with green. Day after day, year after year, with the towering tree as the center and the roots of the towering tree as the link, new trees began to grow. Grass and flowers sprouted around the small tree, and the soil became abnormally fertile. As the wind blew, the seeds on the tree scattered everywhere, landing on the surrounding soil. Finally, a jungle was born. The jungle grew larger and larger, turning into a forest. The forest expanded with water, insects, and animals. Unknowingly, the forest changed the surrounding world, making the air fresher and the soil more fertile. Everywhere was brimming with vitality, cheerfulness, and relaxation. Silently, in Yi Chen's soul's sea, an extremely small seed with a hint of green was gradually born. He had successfully comprehended the law of wood. Opening his eyes, Yi Chen's pupils turned emerald green. However, the emerald color quickly receded and returned to normal. This is the law of wood. Yi Chen retracted his right hand and spread it out. A green light flashed, and a small tree grew out of Yi Chen's palm. The small tree rapidly grew, turning into a towering tree. The branches of the towering tree could be hard or soft. When they were hard, they were like steel. When they were soft, they were like vines. They could whip the void as they pleased. and their destructive power seemed to be even higher than the law of water. Of course, this was the initial stage of the law of water. The current level of the law of water was too high, comparable to the law of light of supremacy. The small tree in his palm vanished, and Yi Chen's body suddenly turned green, turning into a green shadow. The green shadow contained infinite vitality. Yi Chen had a feeling that even if he was hit countless times, he would be able to instantly recover. It wouldn't consume his martial Dao Yuan spirit at all, only the power of the law of wood. In terms of survivability, the law of wood is definitely not inferior to the powerful laws. It is only slightly weaker than the peak laws. It had been more than 10,000 years since he came to the primal chaos battlefield, and he had seen a lot of laws. As for the characteristics of each law, he more or less had some understanding. In terms of survivability alone, the wood law was extremely outstanding. What? The green hoof battle saint was awakened by the spreading law of wood. Seeing Yi Chen's transformation, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Did he really comprehend the law of wood? So simple. Bastard, this is too unfair. The green hoof battle saint was extremely jealous. He was a high-grade demigod, yet he hadn't comprehended a single law. Yet his opponent had comprehended too. How could he live? I'll let you be arrogant first. The fact that his opponent had comprehended the law of wood, while he had yet to break through, made the green hoof battle saint feel a sense of urgency. After comprehending the law of wood, Yi Chen could officially absorb the law of wood's fragments. The law of wood fragment in Yi Chen's soul sea was only the size of a sesame seed, while the one in the void was the size of a thumb. The difference between the two was huge. 100 years, 200 years, 500 years. After 500 years, the law of wood fragment in Yi Chen's soul sea was the size of a pinky finger. The one in the void was also the size of pinky finger. More than half of it had been absorbed. I can't absorb anymore. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Yi Chen's eyes flashed. Since water begets wood, and one could comprehend the law of wood, why couldn't wood beget fire and comprehend the law of fire? As soon as he thought of this, Yi Chen approached the law of fire fragment. The law of fire fragment in the void was like a cluster of flames, swaying gently. Sensing Yi Chen's approach, the flame suddenly surged and turned into a towering wave of heat that swept over. Activating the law of wood, a lush and flourishing world of wood appeared around Yi Chen. When the wave of heat came in contact with this world of wood, it immediately ignited. However, when it was 10 meters away from Yi Chen, it was blocked by a green radiance. Withstanding this green radiance, Yi Chen slowly approached the flame. So hot, Yi Chen felt that his breath was boiling hot. However, this also deepened his communication with the law of fire fragment. If he wanted to comprehend it, he had to experience it. The law of fire was violent, scorching, expanding, and extremely wild. It was completely different from the reserved law of water and the calm law of wood. Chapter 1449. As time passed, Yi Chen felt as if he had turned into a ball of fire with no specific shape. Wherever the wind blew, he would run. Whenever he saw a tree, he would burn. When he saw a river, he would burn. When he saw a starry sky, he would also burn. At first, it was just a ball of fire, but later, it became a super flame that could destroy an entire galaxy, forming a world of its own. Visible sparks could be seen on Yi Chen's body, but there was no smoke. Boom! Yi Chen suddenly burst into flames. Even his eyeballs were burning, turning into pure flames. Law of fire complete. In his soul sea, a small flame was born, releasing heat that could not be ignored. Even faster, Yi Chen was moved. It took him about 200 years to comprehend the law of wood, but it only took him 150 years to comprehend the law of fire. However, there were 3 great laws in his soul sea, which added a lot of pressure. When he first comprehended the law of water, Yi Chen felt that it was too much. His soul sea could not contain it, but now it could contain 3 great laws. Yi Chen understood that this was because he had made multiple breakthroughs in the primal chaos battlefield. His martial Dao Yuan Shun had reached the quasi-gold level, and his sword intent and heart sword had also improved. All aspects had improved a lot, especially after comprehending the law of wood. Not only did it not increase the pressure, but it also made Yi Chun more energetic, constantly nourishing his soul sea. Activating the law of fire, Yi Chun turned into a flaming man. Whoosh! The flaming man flickered back and forth with great explosive power. Under the same realm, his speed was even faster than the water travel art. Rumble! A fireball condensed in his hand, and Yi Chun threw it out, causing a huge explosion. Damn, the law of fire is also complete. The Greenhoof Battle Saint's heart was not in a good mood. Jealousy gave him a strong desire to kill Yi Chun immediately. No, I can't kill him now. I have to wait for my martial will to break through to the late stage of the Ninth Order. It would be best if I can break through in other aspects as well. Shaking his head, the Greenhoof Battle Saint suppressed his desire to kill. Soon, my martial will break through at any time, and my foundation as a high-grade demigod has also stabilized. After comprehending the law of fire, Yi Chun began to absorb the law of fire fragments to strengthen his law of fire realm. After spending 400 years, the law of fire had reached its limit and could no longer be improved. Only a small portion of the law of fire remained. Naturally, Yi Chun shifted his attention to the law of earth fragment. Metal begets water, water begets wood, wood begets fire, fire begets earth, and earth begets metal. The 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other, forming a cycle. The gravity is so strong. The closer he got to the law of earth fragment, the heavier Yi Chun felt. Every step he took required a great deal of strength and energy. Whoosh! A world of fire appeared, burning the void. The void where Yi Chun was had turned into a furnace. The heat waves were oppressive and offset a large amount of gravity. As he approached the law of earth fragment step by step, Yi Chun gradually comprehended the essence of the law of earth. The law of earth could bear and store all things. Fire gives birth to earth, but what also grows on earth. There is water in the earth and water on the surface of the earth. Of the 5 elements, earth was in the middle. Standing in a world of nothingness, Yi Chun didn't feel anything. He had turned into a stone statue. The dust on the stone statue increased, turning into a small mountain. The small mountain turned into a large mountain. The large mountain was baptized by the passage of time and collapsed, turning into a flat and thick land. Finally, a piece of land was formed. It was simple and ancient, bearing and creating all things. In his soul sea, a grain of yellow gravel formed. Law of earth formed. After absorbing the law of earth fragment, the gravel grew larger, softer, and more resilient, turning into a piece of yellow soil. When the 4 great laws reached the limit that Yi Chun could bear, Yi Chun clearly sensed that the divine blood in his body was rapidly turning into nutrients. The refining speed was more than 100 or even 1,000 times faster than before. The power of the 4 great laws swept through Yi Chun's body, nourishing Yi Chun's soul sea and nourishing Yi Chun's body. Pop! His soul sea shook, and golden light shone brightly. If Yi Chun's original soul sea, which was his soul, was a beginner demigod's golden soul, then his current soul was a mid-level demigod's golden soul. With the advancement of his soul, Yi Chun's martial path Yuan Shun throbbed, as if it would break through at any time. Apart from that, there was no pressure to accommodate the 4 great laws. Even without the divine blood in his body, Yi Chun could still use the power of laws for a long time. His spirit body reached the pinnacle of the 9th rank, and his immortal sword body reached the 18th level. He could withstand the attack of a mid-level demigod by himself. The quantitative change of laws actually triggered a qualitative change. Yi Chun raised his eyebrows. This was something that he would never have thought of. However, it was understandable. It was already very heaven-defying for a heaven-defying supreme to comprehend 2 great laws. It was a miracle that he comprehended 4 great laws. Although it wasn't entirely due to his own efforts, it was due to luck. Law of metal. Now, only the law of metal was left to comprehend. Yi Chun couldn't wait to know what would happen after comprehending the law of metal. Becoming an elementary demigod? reaching the pinnacle of the 9th rank? His soul reaching the golden level of a high-rank demigod? Anything was possible. Haha, my martial was finally broken through to the late stage of the 9th rank, and my domain has also reached the late stage of the 9th level. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, let's fight again. At this moment, a loud laugh was heard. It was the ancient Hoof War Saint. Without any warning, waves of black, viscous gas spread out from the ancient Hoof War Saint and enveloped Yi Chun. This was the ancient Hoof War Saint's Black Horn domain. The might of a high-ranked demigod activating the late-stage 9th level domain was simply too great. Caught off guard, Yi Chun was rendered immobile. Green Lotus Sword Domain Rise. A green lotus bloomed on Yi Chun's body, but it withered as soon as it bloomed. The difference in the power of their domains was too great. World of Water, World of Wood, World of Fire, World of Earth, Green Lotus Sword Domain. First, there were ripples, followed by the growth of the forest, followed by the sweeping of flames, and then ashes fell to the ground, forming a piece of land. Finally, a green lotus bloomed. Relying on the 4 worlds of laws and the Green Lotus Sword Domain, Yi Chun finally broke through the ancient Hoof War Saint's Black Cove Domain. Not only that, but the 4 worlds of laws and the Green Lotus Sword Domain worked together to suppress the ancient Hoof War Saint's Black Cove Domain. The ancient Hoof War Saint's momentum suddenly stagnated, no longer as domineering as before. Take my fist. The ancient Hoof War Saint narrowed his eyes and punched out. This punch contained an incomparably powerful will, as if it could pierce through space-time. A late-stage 9th rank martial will. Just in time, Yi Chun unsheathed the firmament sword and welcomed the incoming attack. This sword was not the billow sword, but had water radiance, flame radiance, green radiance, and yellow radiance, containing the power of 4 great laws. Although the 4 laws could not be fused together, which was something only a true god could do, when used together, the power was not as simple as 1 + 1. Chapter 1450. The law of water filled the law of wood with vitality, the law of wood strengthened the law of fire, and the law of fire strengthened the law of earth. In the end, the firmament sword turned into an earthen mountain that smashed down on the Green Hoof War Saint. Boom! The void paused for a moment. Then boundless ripples spread out and struck Yi Chun and the Green Hoof War Saint. Yi Chun's immortal sword physique was enough to block the attacks of a mid-rank demigod. Coupled with the mystic tortoise sacred armor, ordinary high-rank demigods couldn't do anything to him. The boundless ripples sent Yi Chun flying, but they didn't injure Yi Chun at all. Freeze! Yi Chun roared and a layer of earthen armor condensed on his body. This was the armor of earth. The moment the armor formed, Yi Chun felt as if he was rooted in the void. The boundless ripples pushed him away but couldn't move him in the slightest. On the other hand, the Green Hoof War Saint spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. In terms of offense, the Green Hoof War Saint was stronger than Yi Chun. Even though Yi Chun had 4 great laws, he was much weaker than Yi Chun in terms of defense. Yi Chun could resist the boundless ripples, but the Green Hoof War Saint couldn't. Of course, this was only a small loss. Spitting out blood wasn't even an injury to a high-rank demigod. It was merely a waste of energy. How can this be? The Green Hoof War Saint couldn't believe it. His offense was higher than Yi Chun's, but in terms of overall strength, Yi Chun was above him. Defense was also a part of one's strength. Green Hoof War Saint, take another slash from me. Withstanding the boundless ripples, Yi Chun slashed at the Green Hoof War Saint once more. The earthen mountain tore through the boundless ripples and heavily smashed into the Green Hoof War Saint. The Green Hoof War Saint was sent flying like a shooting star. With 4 great laws, Yi Chun no longer feared high-ranked demigods. Even against the best of them, Yi Chun was confident he could escape unscathed. The battle between the two of them lasted for 100 years. Neither was willing to back down. Although the Green Hoof War Saint was being suppressed as a high-rank demigod, his origin energy was powerful and his martial soul was nearly indestructible. Yi Chun would have a hard time injuring him, let alone killing him. In comparison, Yi Chen's defense was even more monstrous. With the immortal sword body and the black tortoise sacred armor, Yi Chen was able to resist the attacks of the ancient Hoof War Saint. Coupled with the earth armor, the Saint's attacks were no different from tickles to Yi Chen. Taking a step back, even if the first three couldn't stop the ancient Hoof War Saint, Yi Chen could still turn incorporeal and ignore the majority of the damage. The Law of Wood could also allow Yi Chen to instantly recover. After 100 years, Yi Chen had developed the wondrous uses of the power of laws to the limit. The Law of Water had water movement techniques and water world. The wood laws included the verdant wood body and the wood world. The Law of Fire had the fire traversing technique, the world of fire. The Law of Earth had the earth armor and the earth world. Although they didn't have many uses, they were actually all-encompassing. The world of law could even be used as a domain. Swordmaster Azure Lotus. We can't do anything to each other. Why don't we stop for now? The Greenhoof War Saint was extremely sullen. As a high-ranked demigod, he couldn't even defeat a heaven-defying sovereign. This was a great humiliation. He didn't want to fight with Yi Chen anymore. After absorbing the last of the god blood, he would immediately find an exit to leave the 15th floor. The primal chaos battlefield was so vast and had countless fortunes. Why should he fight to the death with Yi Chen? It wasn't worth it. Fine. Yi Chen decisively stopped. In the past 100 years, he was only using the Greenhoof War Saint to practice. He didn't really want to fight to the death. Afterward, the two minded their own business. The Greenhoof War Saint absorbed the god blood, while Yi Chen comprehended the last elemental law, the metal law. The law of metal fragment was a metal ball the size of a longan. It emitted a faint golden light. The golden light was not dazzling, but it gave off an extremely sharp feeling. It was as if being illuminated by the golden light would immediately blind one's eyes. The earth world spread, and the earth armor covered his body. Yi Chen gradually approached the metal law fragment. Among the 5 elemental laws, the law of metal was the one with the strongest offensive power. It was extremely sharp. Although the law of fire was violent, it was still inferior to the law of metal. 200 years passed. Oh, Yi Chen frowned. Comprehending the metal law was much more difficult than he had imagined. It had to be said that he only spent 200 years to comprehend the wood law, 150 years to comprehend the fire law, and 100 years to comprehend the earth law. The elemental laws are only missing the metal law. It seems like this has nothing to do with the metal law. It's the primal chaos law's interference, not allowing me to easily comprehend the metal law and comprehend the 5 elemental laws. Yi Chen immediately thought of the crux of the matter. If 200 years wasn't enough, then 300 years. Yi Chen continued to comprehend. In the blink of an eye, 600 years passed. I've finally finished absorbing the divine blood. Let's leave this place first. Glancing at Yi Chen and seeing that he was still comprehending the metal law, the Greenhoof War Saint heaved a sigh of relief. He was truly afraid that Yi Chen would comprehend the metal law. If that happened, he would be in danger. Even if he didn't die, he would still lose a layer of skin. After all, who knew what kind of monstrous progress one would make in comprehending the 5 elemental laws? The 15th underground floor had only entrances and exits. There was a passage when one entered, but it would disappear after entering. The Greenhoof War Saint flew toward the edge of the 15th floor, looking for an exit. 700 years. 1,000 years. 2,000 years. Time passed quickly. Soon, it had been 20,000 years since Yi Chen came to the 15th underground floor. On this day, Yi Chen's body emitted a dazzling golden light, as if he had turned into a golden man. In his soul sea, a grain-sized metal sphere was born. It emitted a sharp golden light and formed a ring with the other 4 great law fragments. Perhaps for an instant, perhaps for an eternity. A faint layer of 5-colored light flickered on Yi Chen's body. Every time it flickered, Yi Chen felt his body sublimate. Crackle. Miraculously, Yi Chen's spirit body advanced from peak rank 9 to perfection. Ever since then, his spirit body had reached its limit and could no longer be improved unless he became a true god and condensed a divine body. His immortal sore body did not break through. It was still at the 18th level, but without a doubt, he had reached the peak. The five-colored light not only changed Yi Chen's physique, but it also increased the speed of refining the divine blood by millions of times. However, the five-colored light was also consumed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. Yi Chen took a deep breath and began to absorb the metal law fragment. Right now, the level of the metal law was still very weak. It was not on par with the other four great laws. When the level of the metal law increased, the five-colored light should be more. The only pity was that he did not have enough divine blood. He had just consumed a lot of it, and he did not know if it could provide enough nutrition. Comprehending the metal law was difficult, but absorbing the metal law fragment was much easier. Every time he absorbed a strand of the metal law fragment, the five-colored light on Yi Chen's body would appear once. Yi Chen felt that he was getting closer and closer to becoming a primary demigod. It was as if there was only a thin veil between them, and when it was lifted, a new world would appear.